Story 1. At 16, my parents blamed me for my brother's arrest, insisted I was a bad influence, and sent me to live with relatives without a phone. I survived and studied. Years later, they begged me to represent him in court, only to learn I was the attorney they tried to bury. Hey, Reddit. So this is probably the most satisfying thing that's ever happened to me, and I've been sitting on this story for a few weeks now, trying to figure out how to tell it. Buckle up because this one's a ride. I'm currently 29 years old, but this story starts when I was 16 and my younger brother Jackson was 14. To understand how we got here, you need to understand the family dynamic growing up. Jackson was the golden child from day one. I'm talking the kid who could literally do no wrong in my parents' eyes. I was the responsible one, the one who was expected to set the example, help around the house, and basically be a built-in free babysitter. When Jackson forgot to do his homework, it was because he was tired from sports practice. When I forgot to do mine, I was being irresponsible and needed to manage my time better. When Jackson got a C on a test, my parents would comfort him and tell him he tried his best. When I got a B, I'd get a lecture about not applying myself. You get the picture. Classic golden child versus scapegoat situation. The thing is, I didn't really mind being the responsible one. I actually took pride in it. I made honor roll every semester. I had a part-time job at the local grocery store. I stayed out of trouble. Meanwhile, Jackson was getting into increasingly stupid stuff. Nothing major at first, just typical teenage rebellion stuff. Skipping class, talking back to teachers, hanging out with kids who were clearly bad news. I tried warning my parents about Jackson's friends. There was this one kid named Brandon who was 17 and already had a juvenile record for shoplifting. Another one, Kevin, had been suspended twice for fighting. These were not good influences, and anyone with half a brain could see that Jackson was starting to act differently around them. More secretive, more aggressive, more willing to break rules. But every time I said something to my parents, they'd dismiss it. I was being jealous. I was being overprotective. I needed to let Jackson have friends and make his own choices. My mom actually told me once that I should be more like Jackson and learn to relax and have fun, instead of being so uptight all the time. Yeah, Mom, I'll get right on that. Things escalated during the summer before my junior year. Jackson had just finished 8th grade and was about to start high school. Brandon, Kevin, and a couple of other kids from their group started hanging out at our house more often. My parents loved it, because they thought Jackson was being social and making friends. I thought it was a disaster waiting to happen. One night in July, I was working the closing shift at the grocery store. I got home around 10:30 p.m. and the house was quiet. My parents were watching TV in the living room, and I figured Jackson was in his room. I went upstairs, did my usual routine, and went to bed around midnight. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to voices downstairs. Not loud voices, but that urgent whispering that means something is very wrong. I got up and crept to my bedroom door, opening it just enough to hear what was going on. My dad was on the phone with someone, and I heard him say, "Yes, this is about Jackson. We'll be right there." Then there was frantic movement, doors opening and closing, and my parents rushed out of the house. I looked out my window and watched them speed away in my dad's car. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I just sat in my room, door cracked open, waiting. They came home around 5 a.m. I heard my mom crying, my dad's angry voice, and then Jackson. My brother was sobbing like I'd never heard before. Not the kind of crying you do when you're sad, but the kind you do when you're terrified. I stayed in my room. Something told me to keep quiet, to not get involved until I knew what had happened. Around 7 a.m., my dad knocked on my door and told me to get dressed and come downstairs. Family meeting. This is where everything went sideways. Turns out, Jackson and his brilliant friends had decided to break into the high school. Not to steal anything major, they weren't that smart. They wanted to vandalize the principal's office because Brandon had some beef with the guy. They broke a window to get in, spray painted some walls, knocked over file cabinets, and were apparently trying to access the principal's computer when the security company's alarm went off. The police caught all 4 of them still in the building. Jackson had a can of spray paint in his hand when they found him. Open and shut case, caught red-handed. My parents sat me down in the living room. Jackson was there too, looking like death. His eyes were red from crying, and he kept his head down the whole time. My dad was pacing, and my mom looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Then my dad said something that made my blood run cold. "We need to talk about how you influenced Jackson to do this." I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. My parents proceeded to explain to me how this was somehow my fault. According to them, I had created a negative environment in the house with my constant criticism of Jackson's friends. I had made Jackson feel like he needed to prove himself. I had been a bad role model by working too much and not spending enough time with my brother. My complaints about his friends had pushed Jackson to act out because he felt I didn't support him. The mental gymnastics required to reach this conclusion were Olympic-level impressive. I tried to defend myself. I pointed out that I had actively warned them about this exact situation. I had told them Brandon was trouble. I had said Jackson needed better boundaries. But they weren't hearing it. In their minds, they needed someone to blame who wasn't their precious golden child. And I was the convenient scapegoat. My mom actually said, and I'm quoting directly here, "If you had been a better big brother, Jackson would never have felt the need to seek approval from those boys." Jackson just sat there and said nothing. Didn't defend me, didn't correct them, nothing. He let them blame me for something I had literally tried to prevent. That's when they dropped the real bomb. I was being sent to live with my aunt and uncle in another state. According to my parents, I needed to be removed from the situation so Jackson could focus on getting his life back together without my negative influence. They'd already talked to my aunt, who had reluctantly agreed to take me in for as long as necessary. I had a week to pack my stuff. They were pulling me out of my school, away from my job, away from everything I knew. And the kicker? They were taking my phone. No contact with my friends, no social media, nothing. They said I needed to focus on reflecting on my role in this situation and learning to be a better family member. I was 16 years old, being exiled from my own family for something I not only didn't do, but had actively tried to prevent. The worst part? Jackson's punishment was house arrest and community service. He got to stay home with our parents, who would support him through this difficult time. I got banishment. The drive to my aunt and uncle's place was 6 hours. My dad drove, and we didn't speak the entire time. When we got there, he handed my aunt a folder with my school records and medical information, gave me one of those awkward side hugs, and told me to think about what you've done. My Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert were good people, but they were clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. They had a small 3-bedroom house in rural Pennsylvania, and they gave me the guest room. They were both in their 50s, had grown kids of their own who were already out of the house and weren't really prepared to have a teenager living with them. The first few weeks were rough. No phone meant no connection to my old life. My aunt and uncle had a landline, but my parents had specifically told them not to let me use it, except for emergencies. I couldn't call my friends, couldn't check in with my former boss at the grocery store, couldn't do anything. It was like being cut off from the world. I tried to email my friends from my aunt's computer once, but she'd been instructed to monitor my internet usage. My parents didn't want me spreading my version of events to people back home. So I was cut off not just physically, but digitally too. In the age of social media and constant connection, I was completely isolated. The worst part was not knowing what people were being told. Were my friends wondering why I'd disappeared? Were my parents telling everyone I'd been sent away because I was a problem? Was anyone back home defending me? Or did everyone just accept my parents' version of events? School started in late August, and I enrolled at the local high school as a junior. I knew exactly no one. I was the weird new kid who showed up 3 weeks into the school year with no social media presence and no phone. Making friends was basically impossible. I ate lunch alone, did my homework alone, and spent most of my free time in my room. The other kids didn't know what to make of me. When they asked where I'd moved from, I'd give vague answers about family stuff. When they asked for my social media handles, I'd say I wasn't on social media. In 2012, that was like saying you didn't believe in electricity. They'd look at me like I was some kind of alien. Teachers were confused too. Here was this kid with excellent academic records from his previous school, clearly smart and capable, but completely socially isolated. I caught my guidance counselor watching me eat lunch alone more than once, probably wondering if he should intervene. But I wasn't being bullied. I was just alone. There's no intervention for that. But here's the thing about being isolated like that. It gives you a lot of time to think. And I had a lot to think about. I thought about how my parents had treated me my entire life. How nothing I did was ever good enough while Jackson got praised for the bare minimum. How they'd blame me for his mistakes instead of holding him accountable. How they'd thrown me away like trash when it was convenient for their narrative. And I got angry. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger that makes you do stupid things. The cold, calculated kind of anger that makes you focused. I decided that if they wanted to throw me away, fine. But I was going to succeed in spite of them, not because of them. I threw myself into school. I was already a good student, but I became obsessive about it. I studied every night until my aunt had to tell me to turn off my light and go to sleep. I joined the debate team because it didn't require me to have a social circle, and it would look good on college applications. I volunteered at the local library on weekends for the same reason. My aunt and uncle noticed the change. Uncle Robert pulled me aside about 2 months in and asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine, just trying to stay busy. He looked at me with this sad expression and said, "You know this situation isn't fair to you, right?" It was the first time anyone in my family had acknowledged that. I nearly cried right there in his garage. He continued, "Your parents are handling this all wrong, but you're doing the right thing, focusing on school and your future. Don't let their mistakes define yours." That conversation changed something in me. I realized I didn't have to accept my parents' version of reality. I could create my own path, and their opinion of me didn't matter. My aunt would call my parents once a week to give them updates on how I was doing. I'd hear her on the phone. "He's doing well in school. Honor roll again. Yes, he's behaving himself. No, he hasn't asked about coming home." That last part was important, because after about 3 months, I realized I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to go back to a house where I was blamed for everything and appreciated for nothing. So when my aunt would relay messages from my parents asking when I wanted to visit, I'd tell her I was too busy with school. Christmas that first year was weird. My parents sent a package with some generic gifts: a sweater that was the wrong size, a gift card to a restaurant that didn't exist in Pennsylvania, and a card that said, "Hope you're learning and growing." No phone call, no video chat, nothing personal. Just a package that screamed, "We did the minimum required to pretend we care." I sent nothing back. Months turned into a year, and then another. My parents would occasionally call my aunt to ask about me, but they never asked to speak to me directly. I figured they were fine with the arrangement. I was out of sight, out of mind, and they could focus all their attention on fixing Jackson's life. Meanwhile, I was crushing it academically. I finished junior year with a 4.0 GPA. Senior year, I was taking every AP class available and scoring high on all the tests. I applied to colleges, writing my essay about overcoming adversity and learning self-reliance. I didn't mention my parents or Jackson by name, but anyone who read between the lines could figure out what had happened. I got accepted to a good state university with a partial scholarship. Not a full ride, but combined with student loans and a work-study program, I could make it work. When I told my aunt and uncle, they were thrilled. They offered to help with what the scholarship didn't cover, but I declined. I'd been saving every dollar I could from my part-time job at the library, and I was determined to do this on my own. My parents found out I'd been accepted to college when my aunt told them. My mom called the house, and my aunt handed me the phone. It was the first conversation I'd had with my mother in almost 2 years. "Congratulations on college," she said, her voice stiff. "Your father and I are very proud." I almost laughed. Proud of what? The kid they'd abandoned? The scapegoat they'd blamed for their golden child's mistakes? "Thanks," I said, keeping my voice neutral. There was a long pause. Then she said, "You know you're welcome to come home for a visit before you start school." "I'm good," I replied. "I've got a lot to prepare." Another pause. "Jackson's doing much better. He's back on track. We thought you'd want to know." What I wanted to say was, "I don't care." I wanted to say, "You blamed me for his mistakes and threw me away." I wanted to say, "You chose him over me, and you don't get to act like a proud parent now." Instead, I said, "That's great. I'm glad he's doing well. I have to go now." I hung up before she could respond. I left for college that fall and never looked back. I majored in pre-law with a minor in political science. I worked 2 part-time jobs throughout college to minimize my loans. One at the campus library, another at a local coffee shop near campus. Between classes, studying, and work, I had maybe 2 hours of free time per day. But I didn't mind. Staying busy meant less time to think about everything that had happened. I had a few friends, went on a few dates, had a semi-normal college experience. My roommate freshman year was a guy named Luis, who was studying engineering. We got along fine, mainly because we were both too busy to get into each other's business. He'd be up at 2 a.m. working on problem sets while I'd be reading case law. We'd occasionally grab food together or watch a game on weekends, but mostly we just coexisted in that easy way college roommates do. Sophomore year, I moved into an apartment with 3 other guys. It was cheaper than the dorms, and I could cook my own meals instead of paying for a meal plan. I learned to make decent food on a tight budget. Lots of rice, beans, chicken, pasta. Nothing fancy, but it was fuel. I dated a girl named Rebecca for most of junior year. She was sweet, studying to be a teacher. We met in a political science class and started studying together. Eventually, studying turned into coffee dates, which turned into actual dates. She met Aunt Julie once when she came to visit for Parents' Weekend. Julie loved her, said she was good for me. Rebecca and I broke up when she realized I was never going to introduce her to my parents. She couldn't understand why I didn't talk to my family. I tried explaining it once. the whole story about being blamed and sent away. But she came from one of those close, functional families where everyone loves each other and problems get talked through. She couldn't wrap her head around the idea of parents who would do what mine did. She suggested I work on forgiving them, maybe try family counseling. When I refused, she said I was holding on to anger that was only hurting me. We broke up about 2 weeks later. No hard feelings, just two people who couldn't understand each other's fundamental worldview. My focus was always on the long game, law school. I studied my behind off and made the dean's list every semester. I applied to law schools my senior year and got accepted to a good program. Not Harvard or Yale, but a solid school with a strong reputation. More loans, more work study, more grinding. But I was used to it by now. Hard work was my comfort zone. Law school was brutal. First year almost broke me with the workload and competition. The Socratic method, where professors randomly call on students to answer complex legal questions in front of the entire class, was designed to be intimidating, and it worked. I watched classmates drop out, switch to part-time programs, or have complete breakdowns in the library at 2 a.m. But I remembered sitting in that guest room in Pennsylvania, angry and isolated, and I used that memory as fuel. Every time I wanted to quit, and there were many times, I thought about my parents dismissing me, and it pushed me harder. When I was exhausted from pulling all-nighters to finish case briefs, I thought about that family meeting where they blamed me for Jackson's arrest. When I was stressed about exams, I remembered my mom's words about me being a bad influence. First year, I worked as a research assistant for one of my professors, helping compile case law for an article she was writing. Second year, I joined the criminal law clinic where law students work on actual cases under supervision. I represented clients who couldn't afford private attorneys, mostly juveniles accused of minor crimes. That's when I realized this was what I wanted to do with my career. Third year, I was editor of the Law Review, which meant even longer hours and less sleep. But I also secured a summer internship at a public defender's office, which gave me real courtroom experience. I watched seasoned attorneys fight for clients that society had written off. I saw kids who'd made stupid mistakes get second chances because someone believed in them enough to fight for them in court. I graduated in the top 10% of my class, passed the bar exam on my first try, which only about 60% of test takers accomplish, got hired by a small criminal defense firm that specialized in juvenile cases. The irony wasn't lost on me. The kid who got blamed for his brother's juvenile crime was now defending juveniles accused of crimes. My first year as an actual attorney was a learning curve. I lost cases I thought I'd win and won cases I thought were hopeless. But I learned fast. I learned how to read judges, how to cross-examine witnesses, how to find the holes in a prosecutor's case. I learned that sometimes the best outcome isn't an acquittal. It's getting your client into a treatment program instead of jail, or getting charges reduced so they don't have a felony on their record for the rest of their lives. I worked 60-hour weeks minimum. Some weeks it was closer to 80, but I loved it. Every kid I helped felt like a small victory against the system that had failed me. Every time I got a judge to see my client as a person and not just a case number, I felt like I was doing something that mattered. By year 3, I had a reputation. Other attorneys started referring clients to me. Judges knew my name. I'd built something real from absolutely nothing. During all this time, college, law school, studying for the bar, starting my career, my parents reached out maybe a dozen times total. Birthday cards with generic messages. The occasional email asking how school was going. Once, my dad called to tell me my grandmother had passed away. But we never had real conversations. They never apologized. They never acknowledged what they'd done. And I never reached out to them either. Why would I? They'd made their choice years ago. I heard through my aunt, who I stayed in close contact with, that Jackson had graduated high school, gone to community college for a year, dropped out, and was now working retail management. He'd never left our hometown. My parents still treated him like he could do no wrong, apparently. Good for him, I guess. We hadn't spoken since the day I left their house. Fast forward to 3 months ago. I'm 29 now, 3 years into my career as a defense attorney. I've built up a decent reputation in juvenile criminal defense. I win most of my cases, and the ones I don't win usually end with reduced sentences. I'm not rich by any means, but I'm doing well. I have my own apartment, I can pay my bills, and I've almost paid off my student loans. One Tuesday morning, I'm at my desk reviewing case files when my secretary tells me I have a walk-in consultation. The name on the intake form was Janet and David Stevens, my parents' names. But it didn't register at first because Stevens is a common last name. I told her to send them in, and when my office door opened and I looked up for my paperwork, I found myself staring at my mother and father. 13 years older, a lot grayer, but definitely them. The look of shock on their faces was priceless. My mom actually gasped. My dad's mouth literally fell open. They stood frozen in the doorway like they'd seen a ghost. For me, the moment was surreal. I'd imagined running into them hundreds of times over the years. In my imagination, I'd always had the perfect thing to say, the perfect way to make them understand what they'd done to me. But now that the moment was actually here, I found myself feeling strangely calm, detached almost. They looked older, obviously. My mom's hair had gone mostly gray, and she'd gained some weight. My dad had aged harder, deeper lines around his eyes, thinner hair, that worn-down look that comes from years of stress. They were dressed like they were going to church or a funeral. My dad in a button-down and slacks, my mom in a conservative dress. Formal clothes for a serious meeting. And I just sat there, pen in hand, looking at them like they were any other potential clients. "Mr. and Mrs. Stevens," I said, my voice perfectly professional. "Please, have a seat." They stood frozen in the doorway. My mom found her voice first. "Danny, is that really you?" Danny. They hadn't called me that since I was a kid. I'd been going by Daniel professionally for years. Hearing that old nickname felt like someone dragging nails across a chalkboard. "It's Daniel now," I corrected, keeping my tone neutral. "And yes, it's me. You're here for a consultation?" They stumbled into the chairs across from my desk, like they'd forgotten how legs worked. My dad kept staring at me like I was a ghost. My mom had tears in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were from shock or some other emotion. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. Who knows? The office felt too small suddenly. My professional space, the one place I felt completely in control, now contained the two people who'd made me feel most powerless. But I had the desk between us, my law degree on the wall behind me, my name on the door. This was my territory now, not theirs. "We had no idea," my mom stammered. "We've been looking for a defense attorney for weeks, and someone recommended this firm, and we just made the appointment, and we didn't know it would be you." Her voice trailed off. She was looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time, taking in the professional clothes, the organized desk, the framed law degree from a school they didn't even know I'd attended. "Interesting," I said, still keeping my tone neutral and professional. "Let's talk about why you need a defense attorney." They exchanged glances. Finally, my dad cleared his throat and said the words I'd been waiting 13 years to hear. "It's Jackson. He's been arrested." I raised my eyebrows, pretending to be surprised. "I see. What are the charges?" My mom burst into tears. Real ones this time. Ugly crying that she tried to muffle with a tissue. My dad looked like he'd aged another 10 years right there in my office. "Embezzlement," he said quietly, "from his employer. About $45,000 over the course of 2 years. I nodded, making notes on my legal pad. "That's a serious charge. Was he caught with evidence, or is this accusatory?" "They have evidence," my dad admitted. "Bank records, forged invoices, the whole thing. His lawyer says he's looking at 2 to 5 years in prison if convicted." "His lawyer?" I asked. "So he already has representation?" "A public defender," my mom sobbed. "But they don't care about him. They just want him to take a plea deal. We need someone who will actually fight for him. Someone who understands he's a good person who made mistakes." I wrote down more notes, mainly to give myself time to process this absolute insanity. Jackson had been arrested for a serious crime. My parents were desperate enough to seek help from a private attorney, and somehow, through sheer cosmic justice, they'd ended up in my office. "I see," I said finally. "And you want to hire me to defend your son Jackson against embezzlement charges?" "Yes," my dad said quickly. "We know this is awkward, given our history, but you're his brother, and someone told us you're one of the best juvenile defense attorneys in the area, and we thought—" "I don't handle adult cases," I interrupted. "My specialty is juvenile criminal defense. Your son is, what, 27 now? That's outside my area of expertise." The hope that had briefly appeared in my mom's eyes died. "Oh, we didn't realize." "However," I continued, "I do know several excellent criminal defense attorneys who handle white-collar crimes. I'd be happy to give you some referrals." I pulled out a legal pad and started writing down names and phone numbers of attorneys I knew and respected. Good lawyers who would give Jackson a fair shot if he was willing to work with them. As I wrote, my mom finally said what I'd been waiting to hear. "Daniel, we're so sorry. We had no idea you'd become an attorney. We're so proud of you." I looked up from my writing. 13 years. 13 years of silence. Of being treated like I didn't exist. Of them choosing Jackson over me again and again. And now, when they needed something, suddenly they were proud? "With all due respect, Mrs. Stevens," I said, my voice still professional, but with an edge to it now. "You've had 13 years to be proud of me. You had 13 years to apologize, to reach out, to acknowledge that what you did to me was wrong. You chose not to. My dad shifted uncomfortably. We thought you needed space. We thought you wanted to be on your own. No, I said firmly. You blamed me for Jackson's mistakes and threw me away because it was easier than holding your golden child accountable. And now that he's in trouble again, you show up at my office asking for help. The irony is almost poetic. We made mistakes, my mom whispered. We know that now. We should have handled things differently back then. But please, he's still your brother. I finished writing the referrals and slid the paper across my desk. These are 3 excellent attorneys. Any of them would be a good fit for Jackson's case. I'll make a note in their files that you're coming on my recommendation. That's it? My dad asked. You're not going to... You're just giving us referrals? What exactly did you expect? I asked. That I'd drop everything to save the brother who sat silently while you blame me for his crimes? The brother who never once reached out in 13 years? The parents who chose him over me at every opportunity? We're family, my mom said desperately. Family, I repeated, tasting the word. You know what I learned while I was living with Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert? Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up for you. It's about who believes in you when things are hard. They were more family to me in 1 year than you were in 16. The silence in my office was heavy. Outside, I could hear phones ringing and people talking, normal office sounds. But in here, it felt like time had stopped. Finally, I stood up, signaling that the consultation was over. I genuinely hope Jackson gets a good attorney and a fair outcome. Nobody deserves to have their life destroyed over mistakes. But I'm not that attorney, and I'm not going to pretend we're a family who can just move past 13 years of you treating me like I didn't exist. My parents stood slowly. My mom was still crying. My dad looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. As they reached the door, my mom turned back one more time. For what it's worth, we really are proud of you. Look at everything you've accomplished. I accomplished it without you, I replied. That's the part you need to understand. I survived being thrown away by my family at 16. I put myself through college and law school. I built this career from nothing, with no help from you. So yeah, I'm proud of myself too, but you don't get credit for that. They left without another word. I sat back down at my desk and stared at the closed door for a long time. Part of me felt guilty. They'd looked so desperate, so broken. But the bigger part of me felt vindicated. They'd come looking for the son they'd thrown away, hoping he'd save the son they'd protected, and learned that the throwaway son had become someone they needed. My secretary knocked and poked her head in. You okay? That seemed intense. Yeah, I said, surprising myself by smiling. I'm actually really okay. Were those the parents you told me about once? The ones who sent you away? I nodded. They didn't recognize me until they walked into my office. They'd been looking for a good defense attorney for their other son and ended up here. She whistled low. That's some karma right there. Yeah, I agreed. Some karma. I heard through the grapevine, one of the attorneys I'd referred them to, that Jackson did end up taking a plea deal. He got 18 months in minimum security and 5 years probation. Not a great outcome, but better than it could have been. The attorney told me my parents had asked about me, wanted to know if there was any way to reconnect. I told him to tell them I appreciated the thought, but no. About a month after that office visit, I got a letter in the mail. My mother's handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was 4 pages long. She apologized for everything, for blaming me, for sending me away, for not staying in contact, for choosing Jackson over me repeatedly. She explained that they'd been in denial about Jackson's issues, that they'd been terrible parents to me, that they'd realized too late how badly they'd messed up. She said she understood if I never wanted to see them again, but that she wanted me to know how sorry they were. She included photos, pictures of me at graduation, at my first job, things that Aunt Julie must have sent them over the years. She'd kept them in an album, apparently. I read the letter twice, then put it in my desk drawer. Didn't respond. Haven't responded. Don't plan to. 3 weeks after that letter arrived, my secretary buzzed me. Your mother is online too. Should I tell her you're in a meeting? I stared at the blinking light on my phone for a solid 30 seconds. Then I picked up. Daniel Stevens, I said, keeping it professional. Daniel, it's Mom. Her voice was shaky. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to tell you something about Jackson. He took the plea deal. I already know. One of the attorneys I referred you to mentioned it. It's not that. She paused. He wrote you a letter, asked me to mail it to you. I have your office address from the business card you gave us. Don't send it, I said. He's really struggling with this, Daniel. He wants to apologize for everything, for not defending you back then, for... I don't care what he wants to apologize for. I cut her off. You need to understand something. I'm not holding on to anger. I'm not waiting for apologies. I've moved on. My life is good. You're not part of it, and Jackson isn't part of it. That's not punishment. That's just reality. She was quiet for a moment. Then, we destroyed our relationship with you. I understand that now. But he's still your brother. No, I said calmly. He's a guy I used to know who shares my DNA. That's it. I hope his time in prison helps him figure his life out. But I'm not his support system, and I'm not yours. Can we at least meet for coffee sometime? Just to talk? No? Goodbye, Mrs. Stevens. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking a little, but I felt okay. Clearer, actually. That was 8 months ago. They haven't tried contacting me since. Jackson started his sentence in February. I heard through my attorney contact that he's doing fine in minimum security. My parents visit him every week, apparently. Good for them. That's what parents are supposed to do. Show up for their kids. Meanwhile, I got promoted to senior associate at my firm last month. Bigger office, better cases, significant raise. I'm working on a case right now that could set a precedent for juvenile sentencing reform in our state. It's the kind of case that could define a career. Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert drove 8 hours to take me out for a celebration dinner when I got promoted. Uncle Robert gave me a pen, one of those expensive ones lawyers use, with my name engraved on it. For signing all those important legal documents, he said, grinning. They're the ones who were there when I graduated college. They're the ones who helped me move into my first apartment. They're the ones who call me every Sunday just to check in. That's what family looks like. And it has nothing to do with blood. Last week, I was in court representing a 16-year-old kid who'd been caught with his older brother's illegal substances. The prosecutor wanted to charge him as an adult. The kid swore he didn't know what was in the bag his brother asked him to hold. His parents believed him. I believed him too. I got the charges reduced to a misdemeanor, with probation and mandatory counseling. The kid gets to finish high school without a felony record. His parents hugged me in the hallway outside the courtroom, crying with relief. That case was personal for me. Different circumstances, same dynamic. Younger kid getting blamed for the older one's mess. Except this kid had parents who fought for him instead of throwing him away. I made sure to tell them that. Keep believing in him, I said. Keep showing up. That's what matters. The mom looked at me and said, You're an amazing attorney. Your parents must be so proud. I smiled. The people who matter are proud. That's enough. So that's where things stand. My parents know where I am, but can't reach me. Jackson's serving his time. I'm building a career helping kids who actually need someone in their corner. And Aunt Julie just texted me asking what I want for my birthday dinner next month. I won, Reddit. Not because I got revenge or made them suffer. I won because I built a life so good that their absence doesn't hurt anymore. I'm not the kid they threw away. I'm the man they'll never get to know. And honestly, I'm completely fine with that. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. Story 2. Hello, my friends, and with our first story. So a few years ago, my now ex-wife filed a false restraining order against me. She was living with her boyfriend as we were getting a divorce and had decided that a false restraining order was an excellent way to be awarded full possession of the car that I had purchased. Now we only had one key to the car, and she was in possession of both the key and the vehicle. This is important for later. Now, I was exceedingly upset that she had knowingly filed a false restraining order, and upon being served, I immediately submitted my appeal and request for a hearing. I contacted my company, had the prints of all my Department of Transportation GPS logs, as well as company internal vehicle tracker data. I also printed out my personal GPS tracking data from the navigation system I was using. So not only did I have accredited logs showing exactly where I was, or more importantly, where I was not. I also had 2 very detailed systems information showing my exact speed, cardinal direction, and other information recorded in 2-minute and 30-second intervals. After I compiled my entire body of evidence, I wrote a 3-page testimony to read in court to assist in explaining the entirety of the data as well as present my side of the appeal. Almost 30 days passes, and I realize that, upon adjournment of the case, there's a chance that I'll be able to reach my vehicle before my ex does. Now, with this in mind, I decided to contact the dealership from which I purchased the vehicle and acquired a second key. Now, as we only received one key when we purchased the vehicle, I knew she wouldn't expect me to be able to drive away with it. So fast forward a few days to the court date. I had driven across 2 states to attend this court judgment appeal with all my paperwork, written testimony, and the key to the vehicle. I arrive approximately 4 hours prior to the hearing time and patiently wait for the magic moment to come, and I got bad news. It was extremely anticlimactic. She was a no-show. The judge ruled in my favor and the restraining order was dismissed. So the judge then asked if I had anything further for the courts, and if not, I was free to go. So I very politely asked, Your Honor, is it my understanding that the restraining order is lifted? The judge replies, Yes. I then asked, So am I at this time able to retrieve my vehicle? The judge then tells me, as the judge of the courtroom, I'm unable to provide you with any form of legal advice. Now, I was about to apologize when the judge then said, However, if you find a seat in the back of my courtroom, I will get someone to provide you with a signed order of dismissal for the restraining order. If you were to be questioned by law enforcement for any reason regarding property or contact, it's best to have this documentation on your person, as the cancellation of the order might not reach the police system until close of business today. Now, the way in which the judge had worded her response was very clear in intent. She could not specifically tell me that I was good to retrieve my vehicle, but she was taking the extra time to provide me with all the paperwork that gave me the legal opportunity to retrieve my vehicle. So I sat down, and after nearly 10 minutes, the court official that was designated with the task of typing and printing the paperwork got the judge's signature on it and brought it to me as I turned to leave the courtroom. The judge calls out to me, Yes, Your Honor. Good luck. So at this point, I had to formulate a plan. See, as the ex-wife had not been present for the court proceedings, neither was my vehicle. Now I have the address for her boyfriend's parents' house, as it was all over the initial restraining orders list of protected properties. I decided to utilize Uber to go to the address and check if the vehicle was present at the address. So upon starting the trip, I requested that the Uber driver wait for me at the address after dropping me off, giving her a quick summary of my circumstances and plan to ensure that I had a witness present for the intended retrieval of my vehicle. Quite simply, to ensure that no false allegations of fictitious activities during the recovery of said vehicle would have a leg to stand upon in court. Now, the lady Uber driver was sympathetic to my cause and agreed, even going as far as to give me her personal contact information in the event that I required her for future court appearances. Now, upon the arrival at the address, the vehicle was indeed present. The lady waits until I acquired the vehicle, left the premises, and then she followed me for about 2 miles to witness that I had left the property completely. And then she went on her way. Bless that lady, she was a saint. So I make it about half an hour away and my phone rings. I answer it, and it was my ex-wife's boyfriend. And as you can imagine, he was not happy. He starts to swear at me, making random insulting comments, which I entirely brushed off. And then he makes a very large, unintelligent mistake. He said, If I ever see you again here or anywhere, I will blow your head off. Count yourself dead. Now, I'm a veteran, and I don't take very kindly on threats to my life. I was upset at him. I was upset at her. And I was just handed a gift-wrapped means of complete and utter destructive revenge. I immediately hung up with him and dialed 911 to report a verbal threat on my life. I go to the parking lot of the local big box store to meet the responding officer and ensure that I didn't leave until I had a case number attached, written statement, and the reporting officer's identification information. I completed my trip to my home state, and the following Monday, as this all happened on Friday, I went to my local courthouse and filed for an emergency restraining order. The judge that was available to hear my case was, interestingly enough, the same judge handling the divorce. She listened to the case I provided, reviewed the police information I provided, and then she issued the requested restraining order. Now, this doesn't sound like pro-revenge, does it? Well, my ex-wife was living with the guy in his parents' basement. The restraining order issued by the judge protected myself, my property, and my spouse from him. See, we were still legally married, so I was legally able to list her as my protected party when the restraining order was served. He could not be within 600 feet of my ex-wife. And as she lived with him in his parents' basement, he wasn't the one who had to leave. She was. But she no longer had my vehicle, so she lost her brand new job. She also wasn't able to get to school as her commute was quite long by public transit, so she failed her college course, but was stuck with the student loans for it anyway. So she was now homeless, a vehicle-less job, less kicked out of her college for non-attendance penniless, as she was atrociously bad with finances. And to top it all off, she was nearly 4 months pregnant with his kid. So the moral of the story, don't piss off a veteran. I don't want to play games. I will go out of my way to avoid playing games. I will bend over backwards to make sure that I don't have to play games. But if you forced my hand into playing aforementioned games, I will not be the one that loses the game, which is something I told her verbatim on our third or fourth date. but I guess she forgot. Guys, what an absolute savage revenge. Listen, the restraining order on the wife's boyfriend that led to her downfall was absolutely brilliant. Play them games, win them prizes, guys. OPI does come into the comment section to give details about what happened after, and it's some juicy, juicy stuff, guys. So listen up now, my wife did not show up to the next two divorce court dates as she had no vehicle and was maybe 2 or 3 states away at the time. It went into judge mediation, which she did so far, and she was very nasty. That's a whole story in and of itself, though. So the ex refused to do any mediation, and eventually the judge became the mediator. So on her final court date, the judge asked us what we both want and talked to us about our request on the floor, and then went to chambers to make her decision. So I came to court with my entire credit history, printed with every debt I wanted, split highlighted, as well as a few pages that I had written so I could explain to the judge why I felt it was appropriate to split these specific debts. I also had paperwork I wanted the judge to sign, which would have my ex removed from any financial claim in the vehicle, as I was the one who filed for the divorce. I spoke first, and I got nearly everything I asked for when it was my ex's turn. It wasn't very close to the following. X says I want $5,000 for any property of mine that might have been damaged, stolen, or sold throughout the course of the relationship. The judge then says, okay, please provide the receipts to the bailiff for me to review in the chambers. The ex said, I don't have any receipts. The judge then says, if you have no receipts, I have no ability to order a reimbursement. What else are you asking for? X then goes, I would like for Oppie to pay my student loans since it was Opie's fault that I had to quit college. The judge then said you were in college less than 6 months. You started college after leaving your spouse, and it wouldn't do the community, the courts, nor your spouse any benefit for me to do that. What else are you asking for? My ex then goes on and says, well, I want the restraining order to be lifted. I haven't been able to see my boyfriend in a few months because of it. The judge says this is a divorce settlement hearing, not a restraining order appeal hearing. I cannot make any ruling in regards to that order in the court at this time. When I do come back from chambers, the divorce will be finalized. You will no longer be the spouse, and the order will no longer be applicable anyway. What else are you asking for? I would like alimony to the fullest amount allowed. My spouse has completely ruined my financial situation and has a full-time job, so was responsible for getting me back on my feet. The judge then said, you mentioned you have or you had a boyfriend. My ex then said, yes, Your Honor, I have a boyfriend. This restraining order made it so I couldn't live with him anymore. The judge then said, so you were romantically cohabiting with your boyfriend prior to the order being served. So my ex then replied, yes, and that was a huge mistake. The judge then says, under the laws of the state, redacted. Since you have admitted to the court that you romantically cohabitate extramarital, you are not eligible for any alimony, and this court cannot order your ex to provide you any financial assistance. So in conclusion, I got everything I asked for, and the ex was making stupid demands, and she was entirely shut down by the judge. I had to give the ex 3 boxes of her property and nothing else. Almost 3 years of marriage, and all she walked away from it were with 2 boxes of random things and 1 box that had her grandmother's dinnerware and several $1,000s of debt. My friend's Opie coming into the comments and providing us with the details of the court hearing is the cherry on top of this beautiful revenge. I wish I could have been there to see the ex-wife's face as the judge denied her request for alimony. Oh my goodness. She literally got nothing. Now to start, this is about the company I worked for, and a trip I took because I had to wire a building for a computer network because the building owner wouldn't. Our company was moving a remote site to a new building, and as the IT guy for the company, I was asked to look at the new building and set up some network parts. Now, the landlord refused to put in any low voltage lines and we got quotes, but they were thousands of dollars. Answer me my car and 4 boxes of Cat 6 cable. Now it's about an 8-hour drive and I was doing about 30 drops, not a ton, but still a few days worth of work and someplace that's already built up. And it's a drop ceiling with insulation on top, messy and itchy work. So the story day 1, we get there Monday morning at the start of the month. Now, it's actually a cool summer morning and we're from the south, so nobody notices the AC not working for about an hour. Slowly, the building begins, heating up. It gets to 80 degrees by noon, 85 degrees by 3 p.m. There are rooms with floor to ceiling. Windows are greenhouses. It's an absolutely miserable time. We've been told by the workers still on site that the leasing company was told that there was no AC in the building 3 weeks ago. The other thing is there are still workers on site. The building isn't completed so much for being ready for a handover on day 1. Day 2, we're getting agitated. It's about 80 degrees in the AM when we first walk in, and it's sweltering. The other guy that came in with me is the facilities manager. He's screaming at people over the phone to fix the AC. We're all exhausted from the heat by 3 p.m. I found a 4-foot hole in the ducts when I was opening the ceiling tile. The AC was blowing, but there was no cold air. We are told the compressor is broken. Day 3, more of the same. It's a miserable morning. I'm finally getting the last lines punched in on the patch panel. The AC guys arrive at about 10 a.m. They finally fixed the unit at 2 p.m. We asked them what they did. They said a lot of things. We again said, "What did you do?" And the reply was, "We can't tell the tenants." Now that was a red flag alert. We contacted our realtor and she said she'd look into what was done. Now she sent me an email later that night that says that they changed the refrigerant from R22 to R410A. I then told the facilities guy, "No way, dude, that's like putting gas in a diesel motor." They would have to change out the entire system. They didn't do that in 4 hours. They basically duct taped and WD-40 that thing back together, and it'll run poorly for about a month or so, and then give out, and we would be stuck with a replacement. Day number 4, there's still no running water system. Some areas still workers on site, and the AC can't keep up with a noonday sun, and it still hits around about 80 degrees by the end of the day. The AC runs continuously. We're packing up all the stuff. We moved, and we're moving out. I then noticed that all the fire sprinklers look like they've been moved, and the metal protection around the drop tile has fallen to the floor. I also noticed that the sprinklers were no longer protruding from the tiles in places and in others. They're quite a bit lower than they were. Yep, the AC fools stood on the fire sprinklers to fix their lousy ductwork. Now we are looking for a friendly way out. We contact the landlord and say, "You haven't delivered a finished building. We're moving out. The lease is broken." The landlord then has a 36-page lease. The landlord won't let us out of the lease, and we're locked in for 5 years. This is not starting off well. So we then get in contact with a corporate lawyer and the realtor, and they both agree that we're kind of screwed. We're actually desperate for any way out. I start looking at the fire system as I used to run all kinds of low voltage lines, fire security, etc., and there is no fire panel in our portion of the building. No smoke detectors are hooked up to anything, which are more red flags. One of our employees that was moving the heavy gear says, "Oh yeah, I meant to mention that I never saw any building permits anywhere." Ding, ding, ding. They did this build out, including demolition, running new plumbing and power lines, and destroying the fire system without a city permit. Cue the call to the city inspector's office. Day number 5. Now, I wasn't here for this part, but the facilities manager told me this. He said the city inspector pulled the permits for the building and there weren't any. He finds multiple violations of City Code Red tagged our area and removed the certificate of occupancy. When I told him to check out the fire system, like you said, he just goes, "Oh, no, 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 I have to make a call." He then calls the fire marshal. Day number 8, the fire marshal arrives on scene. They find no active alarm system in our portion of the building, which is another red flag. They then find a sprinkler riser for the entire building in the area and no water pressure. He then condemned the entire building, so basically they wouldn't let us out of the building because we signed a lease, even though they never delivered a building in any semblance of working order. I called the building inspector, got them smoked, who then called the fire marshal, who then condemned the entire building. They are still trying to fight us over it, but we're pushing them for not only refunding our deposit and the rent, which they've already done, but for the time spent, moving the gear in and out and all the wiring. Now, our lawyer says that they don't have a leg to stand on, and he's happy for them to pay his fees as well. Okay, my friends, first off, that sounded like a horrendous 5 days of being inside a building with no AC. You guys know how I love reading stories about shady landlords getting their just desserts? No, guys, having the building condemned isn't enough. The landlord deserves to have all of his properties taken away. Doing this without a permit and not being up to the fire code is literally putting people in danger. Like, if he does this to commercial buildings, who knows what this guy does to people who rent houses, condos, apartments, or whatever. So I have a really bad leg. I've had 13 surgeries. It's a long story. And I just started at a new school. So after the first 3 weeks, I had to go in for another procedure on my leg. Not that big a deal to me. I've been here before. Upon my return, I had documentation of my restrictions as well as special amenities that were required. So the victory was that I needed extra time to get from class to class. I also must have someone escort me, and I needed unrestricted access to the elevator. Now, all of these got me recurring problems, such as constant harassment by teachers and security about my being in the halls during class time. And why was my cousin out to these first two were annoying, but easy enough to deal with. Now, the real issue was the elevator. I was told multiple times that for security issues I could not have a personal key due to it, sharing the same functionality with the interior door keys. I would have never had any issues with this. As I was told, there would always be someone on the same floor as my classes to open the elevator for me. This, of course, was untrue about 75% of the time. The lack of elevator access meant that I was always stuck in the halls when other students were going class to class. I was constantly late due to having to wait for someone to come by and open the door for the elevator. This also meant that I would sometimes be stuck waiting through the entire lunch period and, due to my absences, could not afford to simply go to lunch after the fact. After about 3 weeks of this, I was tired of not getting to eat lunch during lunch. So I did one of the stupidest things I could have attempted and tried to use the stairs. Now, for context, I was not on crutches. I was on a full-blown walker. About halfway down, I fell hard. One of my friends found me, got someone to help pick me up, and carried me to the office. When getting to the office, they managed to get me to calm down enough to give them my mom's phone number. Now my mom is quite hot-tempered, but can keep a level head normally. When she heard that I fell, she was there in record time. When she got there, she immediately asked what happened. I told her that I was sick and tired of missing lunch from waiting for someone to open the elevator. So I tried to use the stairs, and that was a big mistake, as that set off a sour bomb-sized explosive. She immediately turns around and demanded for the principal and the VP to get their asses in here ASAP. As soon as the principal and the vice principal walked in, she started berating them in a fashion not suitable for most adults. There, let alone kids. And when the VP made an offhand remark about my condition, she physically went after the VP and was swarmed by local sheriffs that provided security for the school. We were escorted out, and after looking at the file and realizing my cousin and I had the same addresses, they figured out that I didn't actually live there. Now my grandmother's address was listed for me as she looked after me after I left school up until around 8 p.m. She was also raising my cousin after an issue between her and my aunt. They used this as grounds to expel me as I was out of the school district and then told her I can be some other school's problem now. I was then enrolled at the school near my house and had to have yet another surgery to repair the damage that was done as the result of my fault and redo the work of the previous procedure. I had gotten multiple statements from teachers as well as my doctors, and my parents were moving forward with a lawsuit naming the VP principal and the county school board. We were contacted by a lawyer who had won multiple cases against our school board, some of which went to the state Supreme Court, and he told us he would take our case pro bono. He was getting tired of going against the board and thought a case like this would be what it took to try and fix their crap. So fast forward 9 months. I was walking out of the court with a settlement to cover all my procedures, as well as a written confirmation that the school would be going through a complete administrative overhaul and that the principal and vice principal would be let go and have their administrative credentials revoked in our state. My friends. And that brings us to another end of our /pro revenge. I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you. Story 3. I came home for the holidays, but mom opened the door and said, "You weren't invited. This is for family only." I turned around without a word. Minutes later, my sister texted, "Don't take it personally. You know how you are." I smiled, froze the joint account, canceled the utility payments, and cut off every card. By morning, my voicemail was full, and the family group chat was on fire. All right, everyone, strap in because this is going to be a wild ride. Using a throwaway account since this story is about to blow up my family's entire world. I, 31 male, regional sales manager for a major pharmaceutical company in Denver. Make around $185,000 plus bonuses, worked my way up from entry level through pure determination and long hours building client relationships. My family lives back in small town Kansas where I grew up. Dad Robert, 59, works construction when his back isn't acting up, makes maybe $38,000 on good years. Mom Linda, 57, works part-time at a salon, probably $22,000. Then there's my sister Jessica, 28F, and oh boy, where do I even start with this piece of work? Jessica is what you'd get if you combined a Kardashian with a toddler having a tantrum. Blonde, fake everything. Never worked a real job in her entire life. I'm talking about a girl who once called me crying because she couldn't figure out how to put gas in her car. She's been studying communications at community college for 6 years, switching majors every semester because the professors don't understand her creative vision. Her boyfriend Derek, 29 million, is basically a walking red flag factory. Sells supplements on Instagram, drives a leased BMW he can't afford, calls himself an entrepreneur while living off unemployment and my sister's money. Which, spoiler alert, is actually my money. Growing up, money was always tight. I started working at 14, handed over most of my paychecks to help with bills. While I'm working multiple jobs and studying sales techniques, Jessica gets to be the princess who needs to focus on her studies. When I landed my first real sales job making $45,000, I thought I could finally build my own life. Wrong. Family guilt is powerful. Dad's truck breaks down. I'm buying a new one. Mom needs dental work? I'm covering it. Jessica wants Cancun for spring break? Guess who's funding that vacation? But here's the kicker. To everyone else, I'm still the weird sales guy who got lucky. Jessica tells people I'm just a pharmaceutical representative who hands out free samples. Meanwhile, she's posting on Instagram about her luxury lifestyle, funded entirely by my bank account. Over the past 7 years, I've sent them $142,000. That doesn't include the car I bought dad, $25,000. Mom's dental work, $9,000. Jessica's credit card debts, $18,000 total. Or their house down payment, $40,000. Jessica's got this whole social media persona as a boss babe, lifestyle influencer. Posts daily about workout routines, skincare, and motivational quotes about manifesting abundance. Has maybe 3,200 followers, mostly thirsty dudes and MLM people, but acts like she's the next big thing. Her bio says, Entrepreneur Sparkles. Living my best life, Sparkles DM for collabs. The entrepreneur part kills me because her only income is a Venmo account connected to my bank. She sells maybe $250 worth of detox teas per month that cost her $60 wholesale. But in her mind, she's building an empire. Derek encourages this nonsense, constantly filling her head with YouTube channel ideas and clothing line fantasies. Tells her she's too good for regular jobs and her brand is worth millions. Meanwhile, he's never held a job longer than 3 months. The worst part? They talk down to me like I'm charity they're doing a favor by accepting money from. Jessica actually told me I should be grateful. She lets me help her, because it makes me feel important. Said I probably don't have many friends. True, but still. So being her ATM gives my life meaning. For years, I told myself I was helping family. But deep down, I knew I was funding their delusions, while they chipped away at my self-respect. The breaking point came this past Christmas, and what happened next changed everything. I'd been dreading Christmas for weeks. My last relationship ended in October. Apparently dating someone who travels for work makes me emotionally unavailable. So I was going home alone again. But I figured family time might be good for me. Maybe we could actually connect for once. Drove 7 hours from Denver to our hometown on Christmas Eve, stopped at Target to grab last-minute gifts. Got dad a nice Carhartt jacket, $160, mom some fancy skincare set, $130, and for Jessica, I don't know why I did this, but I got her the new iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil because she'd been hinting about wanting to start a digital art business. That iPad setup cost me $1,300. For context, that's more than my sister has ever spent on anyone else in her entire life. Her Christmas gifts to family are usually candles from the dollar store or random MLM products she couldn't sell. I pulled into the driveway around 7 p.m. and immediately knew something was up. There were like 6 cars parked outside, music pumping from inside, and I could see people through the windows. Looked like a full party was happening. Walking up to the front door with my arms full of gifts, I could hear Jessica's laugh over everyone else. That fake, loud laugh she does when she's trying to impress people. I knocked and waited. Derek opened the door, took one look at me, and his face just dropped. Oh, hey man. No smile, no Merry Christmas. Just this look like I'd ruined his day by existing. Hey Derek, Merry Christmas. Family party? Yeah, kind of. He's blocking the doorway, not inviting me in. Jessica didn't mention you were coming. That's when I heard my sister's voice from inside. Who is it, babe? It's your brother. I swear the music got turned down and conversations stopped. Like my presence had sucked all the energy out of the room. Jessica appeared next to Derek wearing this tight red dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. Her face went from party happy to annoyed in about 2 seconds. Kevin? What are you doing here? It's Christmas Eve, Jess. I drove down to spend it with family. She exchanged this look with Derek, then stepped outside and partially closed the door behind her. Look, this is kind of awkward timing. We're having a little get-together with Derek's business partners and some influencer friends. It's kind of a networking thing. Networking thing? I'm standing there with gifts in my hands feeling like an idiot. On Christmas Eve? It's not really family time right now, you know? These are important people and... She glanced back at the door. You're still in your work clothes, and you look tired from driving. It's just not the vibe we're going for tonight. I looked down at myself. I was wearing khakis and a polo shirt. Clean clothes, nothing wrong with them, but apparently not up to my sister's standards for her networking event. So I can't come into my parents' house on Christmas Eve because I'm not dressed right for your party? Don't make this weird, Kevin. It's one night. You can come by tomorrow for actual Christmas dinner. This is just business. Business. Right. A business party where I could hear someone inside doing karaoke to All I Want for Christmas Is You. Are mom and dad okay with this? They're at Uncle Mike's house tonight. They'll be back tomorrow morning. And there it was. My parents had been banished from their own home so Jessica could throw a party for Derek's pyramid scheme buddies and her wannabe influencer friends. And now I was getting the same treatment. Jessica, I drove 7 hours to be here. And that's sweet, but you should have called first. I'm building something here, Kevin. These connections could change my life. I can't have... She gestured vaguely at me. I need people to take me seriously as a businesswoman. I couldn't even respond. My own sister was embarrassed by me. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I wasn't part of her fake Instagram lifestyle. There's a Holiday Inn like 10 minutes down the road, she added. I'll Venmo you money for the room with my own money. She was offering to pay for my hotel room with money I'd sent her last month. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds just staring at her, waiting for the punchline or for her to crack a smile and say she was kidding. But she was serious. Dead serious. Merry Christmas, Jessica. I turned around and walked back to my car. As I was pulling out, I could see through the front window. The party had resumed, music back up, everyone laughing and drinking. My sister was already back to being the center of attention, probably telling people about how she'd handled that awkward situation. Driving to the Holiday Inn, I had this moment of clarity. This wasn't family. This was a business transaction where I was the silent investor funding their lifestyle while being kept hidden from public view. I was good enough to pay for their lives, but not good enough to be part of them. That night in the hotel room, I made the first decision that would eventually destroy everything they'd built with my money. Sitting in that Holiday Inn room on Christmas Eve, I did what any analytical person does when they're angry and can't sleep. I started examining data. I opened my laptop and pulled up every financial record from the past 7 years. Bank transfers, credit card statements, Venmo transactions, everything. What I found was even worse than I remembered. $142,000 in direct transfers. But that didn't include car payments for dad, $25,000. House down payment, $40,000. Jessica's credit cards, paid off 4 times, $18,000. Mom's dental and medical, $12,000. Emergency loans never repaid, $9,000. Derek's business investments, $6,000. Total, $252,000. $252,000. That's a house. That's a luxury car and a house down payment. That's my entire savings that I'd been building since I was 22. But wait, it gets better. I decided to do some digital investigation because I was feeling petty and needed to know the truth. I pulled up Jessica's Instagram. Her recent posts were a masterclass in delusional entitlement. Photo of her and Derek at some upscale restaurant. Date night at Morton's. So grateful for this blessed life. Entrepreneur life saturated for manifestation. That dinner was probably $320. I know because I saw the charge on the credit card I pay for. Picture of her new Lululemon haul. Investing in my health is investing in my business. Self-care isn't selfish. Boss babe. Worth it. $450 in yoga pants. She doesn't even do yoga. Derek's BMW in the driveway. My man deserves the best. Hard work pays off. Power couple. Success. I'm paying $620 a month for that lease. But the post that really got me was from earlier that day. Christmas Eve vibes with my real family. Sometimes you have to cut out toxic people who bring negative energy to your life. Surrounding myself with winners only. Chosen family. Your boundaries matter. Christmas 2023. Toxic people. I was the toxic person for wanting to spend Christmas with my family after funding their entire lifestyle for 7 years. The comments were even better. Derek. Baby, you're an inspiration. These energy vampires don't deserve you. Some random girl. Yas queen. Cut off the haters. Derek's mom, who I'd never met. So proud of you both for knowing your worth. I screenshot everything. Every post, every comment, every receipt. Then I started digging deeper. Derek's Instagram was a gold mine of nonsense. Dude had posts about his 6-figure business and passive income streams. Photos of him with stacks of cash, probably the $2,500 I'd sent Jessica the week before. Videos of him talking about financial freedom and escaping the matrix. My favorite was a post from last month. Just closed another $12,000 month. While most people are stuck in the rat race, I'm building generational wealth. DM me if you're ready to change your life. Entrepreneur mindset. Financial freedom are self-made. Self-made. With my money. I found Derek's YouTube channel too. 15 subscribers, mostly videos of him in the BMW talking about success and motivation. One video was literally titled, "How I Went From Broke to Boss in 6 Months," posted right after I'd sent them $9,000 for Derek's business emergency. But here's where it got really interesting. I found Jessica's Venmo transactions. She kept her account public because she's not very smart. She'd been sending Derek $1,800 every month labeled as business investment and supporting my CEO. Derek was taking money I sent Jessica and using it to fund his fake lifestyle, then posting about it online like he'd earned it himself. And Jessica was so desperate to play Instagram girlfriend that she was giving him money to take her to dinner with. That's when I realized this wasn't just about being excluded from Christmas. This was about two parasites who'd built their entire identities around money they'd stolen from me, then had the audacity to call me toxic for expecting basic family respect. I spent the rest of Christmas Eve building a plan, not just to cut them off, but to systematically dismantle everything they'd built with my money. I wanted them to feel exactly as helpless and humiliated as they'd made me feel. See, here's the thing about being in sales. You learn to think strategically. You identify dependencies, trace relationship flows, and find single points of failure. Jessica and Derek's entire life was built on one massive dependency: me. Remove that dependency correctly, and everything collapses. I made a list of every account, every payment, every way I was connected to their finances. Then, I prioritized them based on maximum impact: car payments, credit cards, phone bills, insurance, everything they'd grown dependent on without even realizing it. But I didn't want to just cut them off. I wanted them to understand exactly what they'd lost and why. I wanted them to realize that the toxic loser they'd kicked out of Christmas was the only reason their fake empire existed. By sunrise on Christmas morning, I had a complete plan. It was going to take 3 months to execute properly, but when I was done, their entire world would collapse. And the beautiful part? They'd do most of the work themselves. Christmas morning, I checked out of the hotel and drove straight back to Denver. Didn't even try to see my parents. I was done pretending this was a normal family situation. Jessica texted me around noon. "Hope you're not being dramatic about last night. Family dinner is at 2 if you want to come by." I didn't respond. She texted again at 3. "Mom is asking where you are. Don't make this a big thing." Then at 5, "Fine, be childish. But you're ruining Christmas for everyone." Still didn't respond. But I screenshot everything. Monday morning, I started phase 1, information gathering. I called my parents separately and had the most enlightening conversations of my life. Dad answered on the second ring. "Kevin, we missed you at dinner yesterday. Jessica said you had to work." "I had to work?" "Dad, I drove 7 hours to see you guys, and Jessica told me I couldn't come to the house because I wasn't dressed right for her party." Long pause. "What party?" "The networking event she threw at your house Christmas Eve. You and Mom weren't even there." Another pause. "Son, we were at my brother's place because Jessica said you wanted to host a small family gathering and needed the house. She said it was a surprise for us." My blood pressure spiked. "She told me you guys chose to go to Uncle Mike's. She kicked me out of your house and lied to both of us about it." That doesn't sound right. Let me call your mother." I hung up and immediately called Mom. Same story. Jessica had told them I wanted to throw a family Christmas and needed them out of the house for the surprise. They'd gone to Uncle Mike's thinking they were helping me plan something special. So not only had Jessica excluded me from Christmas, she'd manipulated our parents into leaving their own home by using my name. Then she'd thrown a party for Derek's scammer friends and kicked me out when I showed up. That's when I knew this wasn't just entitlement. This was calculated manipulation. I started monitoring their social media more carefully. Derek was posting daily about his business success, and Jessica was posting about her entrepreneur journey. Every expensive dinner, every shopping trip, every investment in their future was documented online. What they didn't realize is that I could track every dollar. When Jessica posted about her $220 skincare routine, I could see the charge on the credit card I paid for. When Derek bragged about his 12K month, I could see it was actually just the money I'd transferred for Dad's medical bills. But I wasn't ready to cut them off yet. I wanted them to get comfortable, maybe even more dependent. So I kept paying everything while documenting their lies. In January, Jessica called asking for money for emergency car repairs. I sent $1,400. 2 days later, she posted Instagram stories of her and Derek at some spa resort. Self-care Sunday. On Treat Yourself, on Blessed. In February, she needed $900 for school expenses. The next week, Derek posted a video titled, "How I Afford My Lifestyle at 29, featuring the new gaming setup he'd bought with that money. March was the best one. Jessica called crying about how stressed she was with school and work. She wasn't working. She needed $2,200 for mental health support and therapy. I sent it immediately because mental health is important. 3 days later, they posted about their weekend trip to Vegas. Derek's Instagram story showed him throwing money around while Jessica filmed and laughed. The caption was, "Living our best life. Money flows to us because we have the right mindset. My money." Literally throwing my money around while posting about their superior mindset. But this gave me an idea for phase 2. I started engaging more with their social media, liking their posts, commenting supportive things, even sharing Derek's business advice videos. I wanted them to think I was following their success and maybe feeling bad about Christmas. I also started asking Jessica about her business in our phone calls. "How's the entrepreneur life going? You guys seem to be doing amazing." "Oh my gosh, Kevin, it's been incredible. Derek's business is exploding and my brand is really taking off. We're thinking about getting a bigger apartment soon." "That's awesome, Jess. You guys are killing it." I could hear the smugness in her voice. She thought she'd proved something by excluding me from Christmas. In her mind, cutting out the toxic family member had unlocked their success. If only she knew that every dollar of that success came from the toxic family member's bank account. By the end of March, I had everything I needed. Screenshots of every hypocritical post, recordings of every lie they'd told me and our parents, financial records of every dollar they'd spent of my money while calling me toxic. But more importantly, they'd gotten comfortable. Their lifestyle had inflated even more. Derek had started talking about buying a house. Jessica was planning a trip to Europe. They were making financial commitments based on money that was about to disappear. It was time for phase 2, the bait. April 1st seemed like the perfect day to start phase 2, though the irony wasn't intentional. I called Jessica with an idea that would make everything that followed so much sweeter. "Hey Jess, I've been thinking. You and Derek are doing so well with your businesses, and I feel bad about how things went at Christmas. I want to make it up to you by investing in Derek's business. Like, seriously investing. Maybe $60,000 to start." The line went quiet. Then, "Kevin, wow. That's actually amazing. How much are we talking about?" "60,000, but I'd want to be a real partner. See the business plan, understand the financials, maybe meet with Derek's team." "60,000? Her voice went up 3 octaves. "Holy crap, Kevin. Derek is going to flip. There's just one thing. I'd need proof the business is as successful as you say. Tax returns, bank statements, that kind of thing." "Of course. Derek keeps track of everything. We're totally legit." "Perfect. Maybe Derek could put together a presentation. I could drive down for a weekend, meet his team, see the operation in person." "Yes!" "Kevin, this is going to be incredible. Derek's always said that smart money recognizes smart money." Smart money. Right. After we hung up, I actually laughed out loud. They thought they were about to scam me out of $60,000. What they didn't realize is that they were about to prove they'd been scamming me all along. Over the next few weeks, Jessica kept me updated on their preparation. Derek was apparently working 18-hour days on his business presentation. They'd rented office space for the meeting. Jessica bought a new professional wardrobe. All with my money, of course. Meanwhile, I hired my company's forensic accountant to analyze the financial data I'd gathered. The 52-page report was devastating. They weren't just spoiled family members. They were straight-up thieves with clear intent to defraud. By late April, Jessica was texting daily updates. Derek had created a 45-slide PowerPoint about his supplement business with projected 5-year revenue growth. They'd printed business cards and set up professional email addresses. The effort they put into legitimizing their scam was almost impressive. May 3rd, I drove to Kansas. This time, I was invited to their apartment. A 2-bedroom place way too expensive for their actual income. Decorated like an Instagram influencer's wet dream with all-white furniture and a ring light setup. Derek answered wearing a suit that probably cost more than he'd ever earned legitimately. "Kevin, brother, so good to see you, man. Are you ready to join our team?" Our team. Like I was applying to work for them. Jessica was dressed for a Fortune 500 board meeting. Are you ready to see what real entrepreneurship looks like? The presentation was something else. Derek had clearly binged Gary Vaynerchuk videos and was doing his best motivational speaker impression, talking about disrupting the wellness industry and building a lifestyle business. His slides showed projected revenues that would make him a millionaire within 2 years. The best part was the financials. According to Derek, his business generated $9,500 monthly revenue with 72% profit margins. $9,500 per month. I'd sent Jessica $9,000 just last month for emergencies. "This is impressive, Derek," I said. "I do have questions, though. If you're clearing $6,800 monthly profit, why does Jessica still need emergency money? Derek's smile faltered before snapping back. Well, we're in a growth phase. Most profit goes back into inventory and marketing. Makes sense. Do you have bank statements showing the business revenue? Well, a lot of our revenue comes through cash and PayPal, so it doesn't all show up in traditional banking. PayPal statements work too, or tax returns. Another glance at Jessica. We're working with a new accountant to get all that organized. I spent another hour asking detailed questions about supply chain, customer acquisition, competitive analysis. Every question revealed another hole. Derek was sweating through his expensive suit, and Jessica looked ready to cry. This sounds great, I finally said. I'm definitely interested, but I'll need to review all the financial documentation first. Why don't you send me everything, and I'll have my accountant analyze it? Your accountant? Jessica asked weakly. Oh yeah, I don't make any investments without professional analysis. This is $60,000 we're talking about. They nodded enthusiastically, but I could see the panic. They'd just promised financial documents for a business that didn't exist. I'll give you 2 weeks to get everything together. As I walked to my car, I could hear them arguing through the thin walls about needing to figure this out and make the numbers work. Too late for that, guys. I already knew exactly what their numbers looked like. 2 weeks came and went with no financial documents from Derek and Jessica. I got a series of increasingly desperate phone calls with increasingly ridiculous excuses. Week 1. The accountant had a family emergency and won't be back until next week. Week 2. There was a computer crash and we lost some files, but we're reconstructing everything. Week 3. Derek's business partner took some of the documents when he went out of town. Finally, Jessica called crying. Kevin, I need to be honest with you. Derek's business isn't doing as well as he said. He was trying to impress you, but the numbers he showed were projected for next year. So he lied to me about his current revenue? Not lied, just was optimistic about where things are heading. But Kevin, that's why your investment would be so important. We could actually reach those numbers with the right capital. Classic con artist move. When the original lie falls apart, pitch it as an opportunity. Jessica, I asked for current financial statements. If Derek doesn't have $9,500 a month in revenue, what is he actually making? Long pause. It varies month to month. Some months are better than others. What was last month? I don't know the exact number. Ballpark. Maybe $450? $450. Not $9,500. His business was making less per month than I spend on groceries. Jessica, you realize Derek lied to me about generating 21 times more revenue than he actually makes. It's not lying, it's manifestation. He's visualizing success and working toward it. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Okay, forget Derek's business for now. How about your influencer brand? You're always posting about your success. What kind of income are you generating? Another long pause. Kevin, why are you asking all these questions? I feel like you're trying to make us feel bad about not being as successful as we want to be. I'm asking because I was about to invest $60,000 based on information that turned out to be completely false. I think I have a right to understand what's really going on. Fine. You want the truth? Derek makes maybe $550 a month when he has good sales. I make about $280 from my social media stuff. We're not millionaires, okay? We're trying to build something, but it takes time. $830 combined. They were making $830 a month total, while posting about their entrepreneur lifestyle and calling me toxic for wanting basic respect. So how are you affording the apartment, the car payments, the dinners, all the stuff you post about? Silence. Jessica, we're really good at budgeting. Your rent alone is $1,950 a month. Derek's car payment is $620. That's $2,570 before food, insurance, or anything else. How do you budget $830 to cover $2,570 in basic expenses? More silence. Jessica, I know how you're affording it. The question is whether you're going to be honest with me. She started crying. Kevin, we never meant for it to get this complicated. When you started helping us, it was just temporary until we got on our feet. But then things got more expensive, and Derek's business was growing slower than expected, and we didn't know how to tell you. So you just kept taking money while posting about how successful you were? We were trying to fake it till we make it. That's what all the business coaches say. Project success, and success will come. And what about Christmas? Was excluding me from family dinner part of faking it till you make it? That wasn't about money. That was about, we had important people there. Derek's mentor and some potential business partners. We needed to look professional. So I'm not professional enough to be around your fake business partners. It's not that you're not professional, it's just you're a sales guy. You don't understand the entrepreneurship mindset. Those people needed to see us as equals, not as someone's charity case. Someone's charity case. That's what I was to them. The charity case who paid for their entire lifestyle. Jessica, I've been sending you and the family over $250,000 in the last 7 years. It hasn't been that much. I have records of every transaction. $252,000 total. And you just called me a charity case. The crying got harder. I didn't mean it like that. Kevin, you're my brother. We love you. The money stuff is it's complicated. It's not complicated. I've been funding your fake lifestyle while you lie about me to other people and exclude me from family events. That's not complicated. That's theft and abuse. Don't say that. We're family. Family doesn't treat each other like this, Jessica. Kevin, please, can we just start over? Forget about the investment thing. Things can go back to normal. Normal. Where I send money and get treated like garbage in return. I need some time to think about all this, Jess. What does that mean? It means I need to figure out what kind of relationship I want with family members who've been lying to me for years. Kevin, don't do anything crazy. We can fix this. I hung up without answering. Monday morning, I started making phone calls. First call, my bank, to report unauthorized use of accounts where I'd added Jessica and Derek as authorized users. Second call, the car dealership, to inform them I'd no longer be making payments on Derek's BMW lease. Third call, their apartment complex, to inform them I'd been guaranteeing their lease and needed to remove myself immediately. Fourth call, Jessica. Kevin, thank goodness you called. I've been worried sick since yesterday. Derek and I talked all night and we want to make this right. That's great to hear, Jess. I've been doing some thinking too. Good. So can we move past all this weirdness and get back to normal? Well, that depends on what you mean by normal. If you mean me sending money while you lie about your income and exclude me from family events, then no. Kevin, come on. The business thing was just Derek being overly optimistic. Overly optimistic? Jessica, he claimed to make $9,500 a month when he actually makes $550. That's not optimism. That's fraud. Don't use that word. He was just trying to impress you. By lying to me to get $60,000? Do you understand that if I'd given him that money based on false information, you guys could go to prison? Prison? Kevin, you're being dramatic. Actually, I'm being generous. Because instead of calling the police about the fraud, I'm just cutting you off. Cutting us off? I've canceled all the credit cards. The car payment stops next week. I'm not sending any more money for any reason. The line went quiet for 10 seconds. Kevin, you can't do that. We have commitments. Derek's car payment is due Thursday. Then Derek better figure out how to make a car payment with his $550 a month business income. We'll lose the car. Yes, you will. And the apartment. Probably that too. She started crying. But this time it sounded different. Less manipulative. More panicked. Reality was setting in. Kevin, please. We made mistakes, but we can fix this. Don't destroy our lives over some stupid arguments. I'm not destroying your lives, Jessica. I'm just not funding them anymore. There's a difference. Where are we supposed to live? What are we supposed to do? Get jobs. Like normal people. Derek grabbed the phone. Kevin, bro, let's be reasonable here. Family helps family. Family also doesn't lie to family, Derek. Or steal from them. Or exclude them from Christmas dinner. Look, Christmas was Jessica's call, not mine. And the business thing? Okay, I exaggerated the numbers. But that's just good salesmanship. No, Derek, you were trying to scam me out of $60,000 using fake financial information. That's called fraud. Fraud? Dude, you're my brother-in-law. No, I'm the guy who's been paying for your fake lifestyle while you call yourself an entrepreneur on Instagram. Those posts are about motivation, man. Fake it till you make it. You've been faking it with my money for 2 years. When exactly were you planning to make it? He didn't have an answer. Jessica took the phone back. Kevin, what if we pay you back? We can set up a payment plan. With what money? You make $830 a month combined, and your expenses are over $3,200. We'll get better jobs, real jobs. Great. When you do that and pay me back the $252,000 you've taken, we can talk about having a relationship again. $252,000? That's not... You're counting things that weren't loans. Emergency money for Dad's truck that went to Derek's business. Mom's dental work that paid for your Vegas trip. School expenses that funded your lifestyle. All of it was based on lies. We can't pay back $252,000. That's impossible. Then I guess you should have thought about that before you spent it. Kevin, please, you're being cruel. I'm being honest. For the first time in years, I'm being completely honest about what this relationship really is. What do you mean? You don't love me, Jessica. You love my money. You don't see me as your brother. You see me as your ATM. And when I wanted to be treated like family, you told me I wasn't good enough to be around your friends. That's not true. Then prove it. Move back in with mom and dad. Get real jobs. Build actual lives without my money. If you can do that for a year, a full year without asking me for a single dollar, then we can talk about rebuilding our relationship. I hung up and immediately blocked their numbers. Within an hour, my parents were calling. I spent 2 hours explaining everything: the lies about Christmas, Derek's fake business presentation, the $252,000 I'd sent over 7 years. I sent them screenshots of Jessica and Derek's social media posts, bragging about their lifestyle while calling me toxic. Mom was quiet for a long time. Honey, we had no idea it was that much money, or that they were treating you so badly. I know, Mom. That's why I'm not cutting you and Dad off. This is about Jessica and Derek specifically. 3 days later, Jessica and Derek had to give up the BMW. The repo man came while they were at Target, and Derek posted about it on Instagram before thinking better of it and deleting it. A week later, they couldn't make rent and got an eviction notice. 2 weeks later, Jessica's Instagram went quiet. No more hashtag entrepreneur life posts, no more pictures of expensive dinners, no more motivational quotes about manifestation. Derek's YouTube channel posted one final video: why I'm taking a break from content creation. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. They moved back in with my parents, both having to get actual jobs for the first time in years. Jessica started working at the salon with Mom. Derek got hired at a warehouse. A month later, Jessica sent me a long email, not asking for money, but apologizing for real this time, admitting they'd taken advantage of me, that they'd been living in a fantasy funded by my hard work, that Christmas was unforgivable. She said Derek had broken up with her when he realized there was no more money coming. Apparently, his love was as fake as his business. She said she was going to therapy and trying to understand why she'd treated me so badly. The email felt different from her usual manipulation. Painful, but honest. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to process whether this was real change or just another attempt to get back in my good graces. 8 months later, Jessica has kept her job and hasn't asked me for money once. She's posting about normal life instead of fake entrepreneur nonsense. She wished me happy birthday last month without mentioning money at all. Derek moved to another state and blocked me on social media. Good riddance. My parents and I have a better relationship now, too. Without Jessica constantly creating drama, we actually talk about real things instead of financial emergencies. I'm not ready to forgive Jessica completely. Trust takes time to rebuild, and 7 years of lies doesn't get erased by 8 months of good behavior. But I'm not closed to the possibility that someday we might actually be family instead of just relatives. The best part? I've saved $22,000 in the 8 months since I cut them off. Money that would have funded their fake lifestyle is now going into my retirement account where it belongs. Sometimes the best way to help people is to stop helping them. Took me 7 years and $252,000 to learn that lesson, but it was worth every penny to finally get my life back. Story 4. This story is titled, After Losing My Parents, My Brothers Left Me in Foster Care. 10 years later, they want my help. Hey everyone! If you're enjoying these stories and want to support the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free, takes only a second, and helps me bring you even more awesome content like this. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, when I was 10, my mom passed away. It was sudden, and there wasn't much time to process what was happening. One day she was there, and the next, she wasn't. It was a car accident. I remember sitting in the waiting room at the hospital while the nurses spoke in hushed tones. My brothers, Kevin and David, were both there, but they didn't seem as shaken as I was. Maybe it was because they were older, or maybe it was because they had already started pulling away from our family by then. Kevin was 23 and busy with his new job, and David, at 19, was starting college. I was just a kid, and suddenly everything I knew about stability and family was gone. At the funeral, I expected my brothers to step up. I mean, they were adults. Kevin had his own apartment, and David was sharing a dorm with a couple of friends. I figured one of them would take me in, or at least offer to. But instead, I overheard them talking about arrangements. That's how I learned I wasn't going to stay with either of them. The social worker who showed up the next week confirmed it. She was nice enough, But all I could focus on was the fact that my brothers didn't want me. They gave excuses, of course. Kevin said he wasn't ready to be a full-time guardian. David claimed he couldn't juggle school and raising a kid. I didn't know what to say back then. I was just a scared kid who'd lost his mom. But the way they avoided eye contact when they talked to me said it all. They weren't interested in taking on that responsibility. I was shuffled into the foster care system without much fanfare. Kevin signed some papers, patted me on the shoulder, and said he'd visit. Spoiler alert, he didn't. Foster care was a mixed bag. I ended up in a decent home eventually, but it took a while to get there. My first placement was with a family that saw me as a paycheck. They didn't hit me or anything, but they were distant. Meals were served on time, the fridge was stocked, but the house always felt cold. My foster parents didn't talk to me unless it was necessary, and they had two older kids who made it clear I wasn't part of their little family. I spent most of my time alone, sitting in my room with my mom's old photo album. It was one of the few things I'd managed to take with me. The phone calls started a couple of months after I was placed. At first, I was excited to hear from Kevin and David. I thought maybe they regretted their decision and would change their minds. But the calls were awkward. They'd ask generic questions. How's school? Are you eating enough? And then there'd be long pauses. They never really listened to my answers. After a while, I stopped looking forward to their calls. It felt like they were doing it out of obligation, not because they actually cared. One time, when I was 12, I got brave and asked Kevin why he didn't take me in. He sighed like I was being unreasonable and said, "I was just starting my career, man. It wasn't the right time." David gave a similar excuse when I asked him. "I had no idea how to raise a kid," he said. "It wouldn't have been fair to either of us." At the time, I didn't know how to argue back, but their words stuck with me. It wasn't about fairness. It was about the fact that they didn't want me. As the years went by, I learned not to expect much from my family. Calls became less frequent, dropping from once a month to a couple of times a year. I stopped trying to engage with them and gave short answers to their questions. "Yeah, school's fine. No, I don't need anything. Thanks for calling, I guess." Eventually, they stopped calling altogether, and I didn't care. By the time I was 15, I hated them. All of them. My brothers, my aunts, my uncles, they were all the same. They didn't care about me when it mattered, so why should I care about them? The foster family I ended up with when I was 14 was better, though. They weren't perfect, but they tried. My foster mom, Mrs. Clark, was patient, and Mr. Clark treated me like one of his own kids. They had two younger kids, and while we weren't super close, they didn't treat me like an outsider. For the first time in years, I felt like I had some kind of stability. I stayed with them until I turned 18, and I'm grateful for what they did for me. But even then, I couldn't shake the bitterness I felt toward my own family. Every holiday, every birthday, I'd wonder why no one had fought for me. Why didn't anyone think I was worth it? When I turned 20, I decided I was done. My brothers had tried reaching out a couple of times, but I ignored their calls. I didn't want their apologies or their excuses. I was tired of being the kid they abandoned. So, I packed my things, left town, and didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't even leave a note. I wanted a fresh start, a life where I wasn't defined by what my family did or didn't do. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I moved to a new city, got a job, and started building a life for myself. I didn't tell anyone my full story. When people asked about my family, I'd just say, "We're not close," and change the subject. It was easier that way. No one needed to know about the years I spent feeling like I wasn't enough. Looking back, I don't know if I'll ever forgive my brothers. Maybe they thought they were doing the right thing, or maybe they were just selfish. Either way, they made their choice, and I made mine. All I knew was that I wasn't going to let their neglect define me anymore. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my own life, and that was enough for me. Starting over at 20 felt freeing but also terrifying. I packed everything I owned into a beat-up duffel bag and caught a bus to a city I'd only seen on TV. I didn't know anyone there, but that was the point. I wanted a clean slate, where no one knew me as the kid who got left behind. I didn't have much of a plan, just enough money to get by for a couple of weeks, and a vague idea that I'd figure things out as I went. The first few months were rough. I stayed in a cheap hostel while I looked for work, eating instant noodles most days and stretching every dollar. I'd pick up odd jobs, dishwashing, unloading trucks, cleaning offices, just to keep the lights on. I barely slept, partly because the hostel was noisy, but mostly because I couldn't stop thinking about whether I'd made the right choice. Was it stupid to cut ties with everyone and start from scratch? But every time I thought about reaching out to my brothers, I'd remember those awkward calls, the excuses, and the way they let me down when I needed them most. That was enough to keep me moving forward. Eventually, things started to click. I landed a job at a small coffee shop, the kind of place where the regulars knew your name and tipped in crumpled dollar bills. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady, and the owner, Mrs. Patel, took a liking to me. She reminded me a bit of Mrs. Clark, my last foster mom. Kind but no nonsense. She'd nag me about eating more vegetables and staying out of trouble, which I secretly appreciated. It had been a long time since anyone cared enough to do that. Working at the coffee shop gave me a sense of stability I hadn't felt in years. I started making friends with some of the regulars, like Alex, who ran the bookstore next door, and Lisa, a student who always came in with her nose in a textbook. For the first time in forever, I felt like I had a community. No one asked about my past, and I didn't offer any details. They just knew me as the guy who made a killer latte and always had a joke ready. It was enough. At 22, things got even better. That's when I met Sarah. She came into the coffee shop one rainy afternoon, soaked to the bone and looking like she'd had the worst day ever. Her umbrella had broken, and she was running late for a meeting, but she still stopped to order a chai latte. When I handed it to her, she smiled and said, "Thanks for not judging me for looking like a drowned rat." I laughed and said, "Hey, you're the best-dressed drowned rat I've seen all day." She rolled her eyes, but I could tell she was amused. Sarah started coming in more often after that, and before long, we were chatting every time she stopped by. She was 30, a little older than me, and worked as a graphic designer. She had this easy confidence about her, like she knew exactly who she was and didn't care what anyone else thought. It was refreshing, especially since I'd spent so much of my life feeling like I had to prove myself to people who didn't care anyway. After a few weeks, I worked up the nerve to ask her out. To my surprise, she said yes. Our first date was simple. We grabbed burgers from a food truck and walked around the park. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. She told me about her childhood, growing up as an only child with parents who adored her, and how she'd always dreamed of traveling the world. I told her about working at the coffee shop, and my dream of one day opening my own place. I didn't tell her much about my family, though. I just said we weren't close and left it at that. Sarah didn't push for details, which I appreciated. She seemed to understand that I wasn't ready to talk about it, and she respected that. At least in the beginning, our relationship moved quickly. By the time we'd been dating a year, we were talking about moving in together. I'd saved up enough to get out of the hostel and into a tiny apartment, but Sarah's place was nicer, so I ended up moving in with her. It felt strange at first, living with someone who was so close to their family. Her parents would call every few days just to chat, and she'd tell them everything. What we'd had for dinner, what movies we'd watched, even small stuff like the new coffee shop we'd tried. I wasn't used to that kind of openness. My instinct was always to keep things to myself. Sarah was patient with me, though. She'd invite me to family dinners and holidays, and while I felt like an outsider at first, her parents went out of their way to make me feel welcome. Her dad was the kind of guy who could strike up a conversation with anyone, and her mom always made enough food to feed an army. It was nice, but it also made me feel a little off, like I was getting a glimpse of something I'd never had and probably never would. After a while, Sarah started bringing up the idea of reconnecting with my family. "Don't you think it would be nice to have them in your life again?" she asked one night as we were eating dinner. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "Not really," I said. She looked surprised. "But they're your family," she said, like that was supposed to mean something. I told her I didn't want to talk about it, and she dropped it. Or at least, I thought she did. Looking back, I think Sarah genuinely believed she was helping. She grew up in this tight-knit, supportive family, so I don't think she could understand why anyone would want to cut ties with their own blood. To her, family was everything. But to me, family was just a reminder of all the times I'd been let down. For a while, things were good. Sarah stopped bringing up my family, and I let myself believe she'd finally understood where I was coming from. We started talking about the future, marriage, kids, maybe even buying a house someday. It felt like we were building something solid, something I could rely on. For the first time, I thought maybe I'd finally found my happy ending. But as I'd soon learn, some things aren't as solid as they seem. It started with a text message. I didn't recognize the number, so I almost ignored it. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. The message said something like, "Hey, it's been a long time. I know this is out of the blue, but I'd really like to catch up." The name at the bottom stopped me cold. Kevin, my oldest brother. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of mistake or spam. Kevin wouldn't reach out after all these years, right? But as I read the message again, it was clear he knew exactly who he was talking to. He mentioned a few things only my brother would know. Stuff about our mom and the neighborhood we grew up in. My stomach sank. How did he get my number? I stared at the message for a long time, debating whether to respond. Part of me wanted to throw my phone across the room, and another part of me wanted to call him and scream. But in the end, I didn't do either. I just blocked the number. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Later that night, I brought it up to Sarah. "You won't believe who texted me today," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. She looked up from her laptop, curious. "Who?" "Kevin. My brother," I said. Her reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of shock or concern, she gave me this weird, guilty look. "Oh," she said softly. "I was going to tell you about that." I froze. "Tell me about what?" She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "I gave him your number," she admitted. It felt like the floor dropped out from under me. "You what?" "I just thought," she started, but I cut her off. "You thought what? That I wouldn't notice? That it was okay to completely ignore everything I've told you about my family? I thought maybe if you talked to him, you'd realize it's not as bad as you think," she said, her voice defensive now. "You've been holding on to this anger for so long, and I just wanted to help you move past it." "Help me?" I snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You had no right." Her face crumpled, but I didn't care. I couldn't believe she'd gone behind my back like this, especially after all the times I'd told her how I felt about my family. I thought she understood. I thought she respected my boundaries. Clearly, I was wrong. She tried to explain herself, saying she only wanted to help and that she didn't mean any harm. But to me, it didn't matter what her intentions were. She crossed a line and I couldn't look past it. "I can't do this," I told her finally. "We're done." Her eyes widened. "You're breaking up with me? Over this?" "It's not just this," I said. "It's the fact that you don't respect me enough to listen. I told you how I felt, and you went behind my back anyway. I can't be with someone who thinks they know better than me about my own life." She started crying, which only made me angrier. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, let's talk about this. We can fix it." But I didn't want to talk anymore. I'd said everything I needed to say. "You need to move out," I told her. "Take as much time as you need, but I want you gone." She cried harder, begging me to reconsider, but my mind was made up. Trust is everything in a relationship, and once it's broken, there's no going back. At least not for me. The next few days were a blur. Sarah moved out of our apartment, taking her things one box at a time. I tried to avoid being there while she packed. It was too painful to watch, even though I knew I'd done the right thing. Her parents started calling me, which only made things worse. They left voicemail after voicemail, saying Sarah was heartbroken and didn't understand why I was being so harsh. They argued that she had good intentions and didn't deserve to be punished for one mistake. But it wasn't just one mistake. It was a betrayal of trust. And if they couldn't understand that, there was no point in trying to explain it. I blocked their numbers too. One night, about a week after Sarah moved out, I sat on the couch staring at the empty space where her bookshelf used to be. I felt this weird mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, relief. Part of me missed her, but another part of me was glad she was gone. I couldn't shake the feeling that this breakup was inevitable, that sooner or later, her idea of family and mine were bound to clash. Looking back, I think Sarah genuinely believed she was helping me. She thought she was fixing something that was broken, but what she didn't understand is that some things don't need fixing. Some things are better left alone. I didn't need closure with my brothers. I didn't need to forgive them or have a heart-to-heart. All I needed was the peace that came from knowing I was in control of my own life. Sarah couldn't see that, and in the end, that's what drove us apart. After Sarah moved out, I thought things would settle down. I was wrong. If anything, the drama just ramped up. Sarah's parents kept trying to get involved. Even though I'd blocked their numbers, they found ways to get messages to me. One time, they showed up at the coffee shop while I was working. I had no idea they'd come until Mrs. Patel came to the back and told me, "There's a couple asking for you. They seem upset." My heart sank. I already knew who it was. When I walked out to the front, there they were. Sarah's mom and dad, looking like they'd just stepped off a suburban family postcard. Her mom had tears in her eyes, and her dad looked ready to give me a lecture. "We just want to talk," her dad said as soon as he saw me. I sighed. "I'm at work. This isn't the time or place." "Well, you haven't given us much of a choice," her mom said, her voice trembling. "You blocked our numbers, and Sarah is devastated. You won't even hear her out." "There's nothing to hear," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "She broke my trust. End of story." Her dad stepped forward, clearly trying to intimidate me. "Do you know how much she's been crying? She made a mistake, but she didn't do it out of malice. She cares about you, and she was only trying to help." I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the frustration bubbling inside me. "Look," I said, I'm sorry she's hurting, but that doesn't change what happened. I made my boundaries clear, and she ignored them. That's not something I can just get over. But you're throwing away years of a relationship over one incident, her mom said, almost pleading now. She's in therapy, you know. She's trying to understand why she did what she did. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It doesn't change what she did, I replied. I need you to leave now. I'm not discussing this any further. Mrs. Patel must have sensed the tension, because she came out from the back and gently but firmly told them they needed to leave. I felt bad that she had to get involved, but I was grateful she had my back. As they left, her dad muttered something about me being cold and ungrateful. I just shook my head and went back to work. That wasn't the end of it, though. Sarah herself started sending me letters. At first, I ignored them. I didn't even open the first few, just tossed them in the trash. But one day, curiosity got the better of me, and I opened one. In the letter, she apologized again for what she'd done. She said she regretted crossing my boundaries and wished she could take it back. But she also doubled down on her reasoning, saying she still believed I needed to confront my past. I just wanted you to have the chance to heal, she wrote. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was trying to help. Reading that letter made me angrier than I thought it would. It wasn't that she was apologizing. That part was fine. But the way she kept framing it as if she knew better than me about my own life, that made my blood boil. She didn't understand that her version of help was the exact opposite of what I needed. I didn't respond to her letters. I didn't see the point. It was clear we were never going to see eye to eye on this, and dragging it out would just make things worse. I focused on work, on rebuilding my routine without her. Some days were easier than others. There were moments when I'd think about texting her or calling her, just to see how she was doing. But I knew better. Once trust is broken, it's almost impossible to fix. Around this time, my brothers started trying to contact me more persistently. Blocking Kevin's number hadn't been enough. They found me on social media too. I'd deleted my accounts years ago, but apparently Kevin had gotten David involved, and David wasn't blocked yet. I got a message from him that just said, "We need to talk." I deleted it without replying, but the message lingered in my head for days. What did they want? Why now? I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah's meddling had opened a door I'd worked hard to keep closed. It made me resent her all over again, even though I knew I was the one who had to deal with it now. Eventually, I decided to send David one last message. It was short and to the point. I'm not interested in talking. Please stop contacting me. I blocked him immediately after sending it. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong again. One night, I was sitting in my apartment when I got a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before opening it. When I finally did, I was stunned to see Kevin standing there. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice cold. "I just want to talk," he said, holding his hands up like he was surrendering. "Can I come in?" "No," I said flatly. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it here." He looked taken aback but nodded. "Look, I know you're mad at me and David. I get it. We should have done more when Mom died. We screwed up, but we've been trying to make it right, and you keep shutting us out." I crossed my arms. "You had 10 years to make it right. Why now?" He hesitated. "We didn't know how to reach you." And then Sarah reached out. She told us what happened, and it got us thinking. We just want a chance to fix things. Hearing him say her name felt like a punch to the gut. "Sarah had no right to get involved," I said through gritted teeth, "and you have no right to show up here uninvited. I've made it clear I don't want to talk to you." Kevin's face fell, but I didn't care. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for everything. I miss my little brother." "You should have thought about that before you abandoned him," I said. Then I shut the door in his face. That night, I couldn't sleep. Seeing Kevin brought back memories I'd tried to bury. Memories of being a scared, lonely kid, wondering why no one wanted him. It reminded me why I'd cut ties in the first place. Some people don't deserve second chances. After Kevin showed up at my door, I knew I had to make some changes. Blocking numbers and ignoring messages wasn't enough anymore. My family had a way of creeping back in, no matter how clear I made it that I didn't want anything to do with them. It felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next message or knock at the door. I hated feeling that way, like I wasn't fully in control of my own life. The first thing I did was talk to my landlord. I explained the situation, leaving out some details, and asked if there was any way I could get out of my lease early. He wasn't thrilled, but after I offered to cover a month's rent as a penalty, he agreed. I started looking for a new place immediately, focusing on neighborhoods farther from where Kevin might think to look. Within a week, I found a small studio apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And most importantly, it was a fresh start. Packing up my old place was bittersweet. As much as I wanted to leave, this apartment had been my first real home after foster care. It was where I'd started rebuilding my life, piece by piece. It was where I met Sarah, where I'd thought, for a while, that I could finally have something stable. Leaving it felt like leaving behind a chapter of my life, one that had been both painful and hopeful in its own way. The move helped more than I expected. Being in a new place with new surroundings gave me a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts at the coffee shop and saving up for the future. Mrs. Patel noticed I was working harder than usual and pulled me aside one day. "You okay?" she asked, her eyes full of concern. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just keeping busy." She didn't push, but I could tell she didn't fully believe me. Still, her kindness meant a lot. It reminded me that not all relationships had to be complicated or painful. Some people just cared because they wanted to, no strings attached. Sarah, of course, didn't give up right away. Even after moving, I got a couple more letters from her, forwarded to my new address. I didn't bother opening them. I knew whatever she had to say wouldn't change anything. I'd made my decision, and I wasn't going to second-guess it. I kept telling myself that trust was the foundation of any relationship, and once it's broken, there's no going back. It was hard, though. Some nights I'd lie awake thinking about the good times we'd had and wondering if I'd been too harsh. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. What she'd done wasn't just a mistake. It was a fundamental disregard for who I was and what I needed. As for my brothers, I didn't hear from them again after Kevin's visit. Whether they'd finally gotten the message or were just waiting for the right moment to try again, I didn't know. And honestly, I didn't care. The more time passed, the more I realized how much lighter I felt without them in my life. I wasn't carrying around that anger and resentment anymore, not because I'd forgiven them, but because I'd finally accepted that I didn't need them. Their opinions, their guilt trips, their attempts to reconnect, none of it mattered. I was done letting them have power over me. One day, about 6 months after Sarah and I broke up, I got an email from an old friend I hadn't talked to in years. It was someone I'd met during my time in foster care, a guy named Marcus. He'd been a couple of years older than me, and we'd lost touch after he aged out of the system. Seeing his name in my inbox was a surprise, but a welcome one. In his email, Marcus said he'd recently moved to my city and was working as a mechanic. He asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime and catch up. I hesitated at first. Letting someone from my past back into my life felt risky, especially after everything that had happened. But Marcus wasn't like my brothers or Sarah. He knew what it was like to grow up without a safety net, to feel like you had to figure everything out on your own. So I replied and set up a time to meet. Seeing Marcus again was like stepping back into a world I'd almost forgotten. We talked for hours, sharing stories about our foster families, and laughing about the dumb stuff we used to do as kids. He told me about his struggles trying to find stable work after aging out and how he'd finally landed on his feet. I told him about my job at the coffee shop and my dream of one day opening my own place. At one point, Marcus leaned back in his chair and said, "You've done good for yourself, man. I'm proud of you." It caught me off guard. I wasn't used to hearing that from anyone, let alone someone who knew the darker parts of my past. But it meant a lot, more than I could put into words. Over the next few months, Marcus and I became close friends again. Having someone who understood my past, who didn't judge or try to fix me, was a game changer. He reminded me that family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who show up for you when it counts. With Marcus's encouragement, I started thinking seriously about my future. I'd been saving up for years, and while I wasn't anywhere near ready to open my own coffee shop, the dream didn't feel as far off as it used to. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building something real, something that was entirely mine. Looking back, cutting ties with Sarah and my brothers was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but it was also one of the best. It taught me the importance of boundaries, of standing up for what I need and not letting anyone guilt me into compromising that. I don't regret the choices I made, even though they were painful. They brought me to where I am now, a place where I can finally start moving forward. As for my family, I wish them well, but I don't need them in my life. I've learned that some relationships aren't worth saving, and that's okay. Not every story needs a happy ending. Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and focus on building the life you deserve. Story 5. My brother's kids banged on my door at 2 a.m. Their parents locked them out again, so I taught him a lesson he'll never forget. Hey Reddit, never thought I'd be one of those people posting family drama online, but this situation got so completely messed up that I need to get it off my chest and maybe warn others who might be in similar situations. My brother kept locking his kids out of the house in the middle of the night and they'd show up at my door crying, freezing, and terrified. After months of watching this pattern escalate, I finally made sure he'd never pull that stunt again. Here's the whole story of how it went down. I'm 34, single, work as an electrician doing mostly commercial jobs around the city. Office buildings, warehouses, retail spaces, that kind of thing. I own a small two-bedroom house in a decent middle-class neighborhood where people actually mow their lawns, take care of their properties, and nobody blasts music at 3 a.m. or leaves broken cars rusting in driveways. It's quiet, predictable, safe. Exactly what I wanted after years of apartment living with paper-thin walls, upstairs neighbors who sounded like they were training for MMA fights at midnight, and people who thought personal space and consideration for others were just polite suggestions rather than basic human decency. Bought the house 5 years ago when I was 29. Saved up for years, working overtime whenever I could get it, skipping vacations and eating cheap meals to build that down payment. The neighborhood's older but well-maintained tree-lined streets, kids riding bikes during the day, people who wave when you drive past. My house is nothing fancy, built in the 1970s, needs some updates, but it's solid. I've been slowly renovating it myself, room by room, using the skills I picked up on job sites and from watching countless YouTube tutorials late at night. My brother Tyler is 38, married to a woman named Christina, and they've got 2 kids, Emma, who's 8, and Logan, who's 6. On paper, they look like a normal suburban family. Nice house, 2 cars, the whole package. But behind closed doors, complete disaster. Tyler and I grew up in the same house but turned out completely different. I learned early that if you want something, you work for it. He learned that if you complain loud enough, someone else handles your problems. Our parents enabled him constantly, always making excuses for his laziness and poor decisions. By the time we were teenagers, the pattern was set. I was the responsible one. He was the golden child who could do no wrong. When Tyler married Christina 7 years ago, I knew it would be a train wreck. She's one of those people who thinks having kids is like getting a puppy. Fun until you realize they require actual work. They had Emma right away, then Logan 2 years later, and suddenly reality hit that children need constant attention, supervision, and care. The problem started small. Tyler and Christina would complain at family gatherings about how exhausting parenting was, how they never got time alone anymore. But instead of actually parenting and creating structure, they seemed to resent the kids for existing and needing things. I started noticing concerning things at family dinners. The way Tyler would snap at Emma for asking simple questions. How Christina would ignore Logan when he tried to show her something. The kids would sit quietly with tablets while adults talked, and if they made noise, they'd get harsh looks and be told to go away. But I didn't say anything. Wasn't my place. People handle stress differently. Maybe it would get better. They didn't get better. They got exponentially worse. The first incident that really opened my eyes happened on a Tuesday night in late September, about 6 months ago from now. I was deep asleep, actually having a decent dream for once, when someone started pounding on my front door at exactly 2:17 a.m., according to my phone. Not gentle knocking, not the doorbell, but full-on desperate panic pounding, like the house was actively on fire. And seconds mattered. I jolted awake with my heart racing, stumbled out of bed in my boxers and t-shirt, grabbed my phone to call the cops if this turned out to be some kind of home invasion or emergency, and carefully looked through the peephole expecting to see who knows what. Cops, firefighters, someone injured, anything but what was actually there. 2 small figures stood on my porch under the yellow glow of the porch light. My niece Emma and nephew Logan, both wearing thin pajamas, no coats, no shoes, just socks. Emma was holding Logan's hand while he openly sobbed, his whole little body shaking. I yanked the door open immediately, cold air rushing into my house. "What the heck? What are you 2 doing here at 2 in the morning?" Emma looked up at me with red, puffy eyes that had clearly been crying for a while. Her voice was small and scared. "Mom and Dad locked us out. We knocked and knocked on the door, but they won't open it. We don't know what to do." My blood went absolutely cold despite the chill from outside. It was 40 degrees according to my weather app. These kids were standing outside in thin cotton pajamas and socks, no protective clothing whatsoever, in the middle of the night, 3 blocks from their house. "Come inside right this second. Right now." I pulled them in, immediately closed the door against the cold, grabbed blankets from the closet, and got them wrapped up on my couch. Logan was shaking badly. I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from crying or both. His face was blotchy and wet with tears. Emma tried to act brave and composed, like she was the adult in this situation, but I could see the fear in her eyes. This 8-year-old kid was terrified and trying to hold it together for her younger brother. I got them situated with the blankets, turned up the thermostat, and sat down in front of them. Okay, I need you to tell me exactly what happened tonight. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out. Emma took a shaky breath and explained the whole situation. They'd been watching TV in the living room around midnight, already way past when kids that age should be up on a school night. Their parents were in the master bedroom with the door closed as usual, not supervising, not checking on them. Emma had gotten hungry and went to the kitchen for a snack. When she came back through the living room, she noticed the front door was standing wide open. She went to close it because it was cold, and when she turned around, she realized her parents had come out and locked their bedroom door. She knocked and knocked, but they wouldn't respond. Then she realized Logan wasn't inside. He'd gone out to the backyard to check on their dog. They have this old retriever that sometimes sleeps in a doghouse outside. When Logan tried to come back in through the front door, it was locked. He tried the back door, also locked. Both kids ended up completely locked out of the house, every entry point secured. Parents not responding to doorbell, knocking, nothing. They'd walked 3 blocks to my house in the dark, in their pajamas, because they didn't know what else to do, and didn't know any neighbors well enough to knock on their doors at 2 a.m. Emma knew where I lived because she'd been here for a few birthday parties. So they walked, in the cold and dark, on empty streets, just 2 little kids trying to find safety. I called Tyler immediately, fighting to keep my voice calm, when what I really wanted to do was reach through the phone and shake some sense into him. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up, voice groggy and irritated like I'd just interrupted something important. What? Your kids are at my house. You locked them out of the house. Long pause on his end. Then, with zero concern in his voice, what are you talking about? Emma and Logan are sitting on my couch right now wrapped in blankets. They walked 3 blocks to my house at 2 in the morning because you and Christina locked them out of the house. We didn't lock them out. They must have gone outside to play or something and the door shut behind them. Kids do stuff like that. Tyler, Emma said you locked the bedroom door and wouldn't answer when they knocked. Logan was locked outside trying to get back in. It's 40 degrees out and they're in thin pajamas. She's exaggerating like kids do. We were asleep. We didn't hear anything. Just send them home. Send them home? It's 2 a.m. They're in pajamas with no shoes, and they just walked 3 blocks in the cold because their parents locked them out. So drive them over then. I'm not getting out of bed for this. I have work in the morning. That's the moment I knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't just some unfortunate accident or misunderstanding. He wasn't panicked, wasn't apologizing profusely, wasn't rushing over to get his kids or expressing any relief that they were safe. He was simply annoyed that I'd interrupted his sleep and was now making demands for his time and attention. I drove them back anyway because they needed to be home, needed their beds, needed their school clothes and backpacks for the next morning. The whole drive over, Emma just stared silently out the window, not saying anything while Logan fell asleep against her shoulder, exhausted from crying and walking and fear. This little 6-year-old kid who should have been safe in bed was instead traumatized and exhausted at 2:30 in the morning. Tyler answered his front door wearing just his boxers and an undershirt, looking irritated and impatient like we were inconveniencing him. Didn't thank me for bringing them home. Didn't apologize for what happened. Didn't check to see if the kids were okay. Didn't ask if they were cold or scared. Just took them by the shoulders, guided them inside, and shut the door in my face without another word. I stood there on his porch for a solid minute, just staring at that closed door, processing what had just happened. The complete dismissiveness. The total lack of concern for his children's safety and well-being. The casual way he dismissed their fear and my worry. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong in that house, and those kids were paying the price for their parents' failures. Drove home and couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. Just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, kept thinking about Emma's scared face when she first appeared on my porch, about Logan crying, about how 2 small children had walked 3 blocks in the dark to find help because the people who were supposed to protect them had literally locked them out in the cold. The images kept replaying in my head on an endless loop. I told myself it was probably a one-time thing, a terrible mistake. Maybe Tyler had been confused or half asleep. Maybe there was some explanation that made sense. People screw up sometimes. Parents make mistakes. Maybe this was just one bad night, and everything would be fine going forward. I was wrong. So completely, utterly wrong. 2 weeks later, on a Friday night, it happened again. This time it was 1:45 a.m. when the pounding started. Same desperate banging on my front door. Same 2 kids on my porch. Same thin pajamas and bare feet. October now. Temperatures dropping into the 30s at night, getting dangerously cold for kids dressed for indoor comfort. They did it again, Emma said quietly when I opened the door, her voice flat and resigned like she'd already accepted this as normal. I brought them inside immediately, got them wrapped in blankets and warming up, and this time I was prepared with detailed questions. I needed to understand exactly what was happening and why. Tell me everything that happened tonight, from the very beginning. Don't skip any details. Emma explained in that tired, defeated voice that they'd both been in bed, actually asleep for once, at a reasonable hour. Logan woke up around 1 a.m. needing to use the bathroom urgently, but when he tried their bedroom door, it was locked from the outside. He knocked for their parents, called out for them, but nobody came. He really couldn't hold it anymore, and had an accident right there by the door, which woke Emma up. They both started knocking louder then yelling, then pounding on the door, trying desperately to get their parents to come unlock it. Nothing. Complete silence from the other side. Emma said she could hear the TV on in the living room, could see the light under their bedroom door, absolutely knew someone was awake out there. But nobody came to help. Nobody responded to their desperate calls. Eventually, Emma had figured out how to use a hanger to pop the window screen off their bedroom window. They both climbed out, and this is the part that made my stomach drop. They climbed out a second-story window, dropped down into the bushes below that fortunately broke their fall, and then walked to my house because the front door was locked from the inside and they couldn't get back in any other way. A second-story window. These kids, an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, had climbed out a second-story window in the middle of the night in the cold because their parents had deliberately locked them in their room and wouldn't let them out even for basic bathroom needs. This time, I took extensive photos with my phone, pictures of their pajamas still slightly damp from Logan's accident, their bare feet, dirty from walking on sidewalks. The timestamp on my phone clearly showing 1:45 a.m. I asked Emma to tell me the whole story again while I recorded video, getting her statement documented. She looked completely exhausted, but answered every single question I asked with heartbreaking detail. I called Tyler again, and this time the conversation was even worse because he didn't even pretend to be surprised or concerned. "They're at your place again, huh?" Not, "Oh no, are they okay?" Not, "What happened?" Just casual acknowledgement like this was becoming routine. "You locked them in their bedroom, Tyler. They had to climb out a second-story window to get out. We lock their door at night so they don't wander around the house and get into stuff or make noise that keeps us awake. It's called establishing boundaries and structure. Maybe if you actually had kids of your own, you'd understand how parenting works. Tyler, they climbed out a second-story window. They could have been seriously injured. Logan needed to use the bathroom and you locked him in the room with no way out. That's their choice to climb out. They could have just stayed in their room quietly and gone back to sleep like normal kids. Logan's 6 years old. He can learn to hold it until morning." The casual cruelty in his voice, the complete lack of empathy or concern, made me want to reach through the phone and physically shake him until his brain started working properly. But I kept my voice level and calm, told him I was bringing the kids back home, and hung up before I said something I'd regret and make the situation worse for Emma and Logan. Drove them home once again. Tyler didn't even bother coming to the door this time. Christina answered instead, wearing pajamas and looking annoyed that she had to pause whatever streaming show she was binge-watching. She took the kids without saying a single word to them or me and shut the door in my face just like Tyler had done before. That's when I made the decision to start seriously documenting everything. Went to the store the next morning and bought a dedicated notebook just for this. Started writing down exact dates, times, detailed descriptions of exactly what the kids told me had happened, took more photos, kept everything organized. Because somewhere deep down, I knew this pattern wasn't going to stop on its own, and eventually, I was going to need ironclad proof of what was happening to build a case for intervention. The third incident happened 3 weeks later, and this one was somehow even worse than the first two. School night, 11:30 p.m., and only Emma showed up at my door this time. She was alone, shivering, arms wrapped around herself trying to stay warm. "Where's Logan?" I asked immediately, looking past her expecting to see him following. "Still inside. They only locked me out this time." The story she told made my blood boil. She'd asked for a glass of water after her official bedtime because she was genuinely thirsty. Her dad had yelled at her to go back to bed and stop bothering them. She'd explained politely that she really was thirsty and just needed some water. That's when he'd grabbed her roughly by the arm, marched her straight to the front door, physically pushed her outside in her pajamas, and locked the door behind her. Just like that. No warning, no second chance, just immediate punishment for the crime of being a thirsty 8-year-old child. Emma had knocked and knocked on that door, pleading to be let back in. Nobody answered. She could hear Logan crying inside the house, could hear her dad's voice yelling at Logan to shut up and go to sleep. So she'd walked the 3 blocks to my house alone in the dark because she had literally nowhere else to go. I documented everything again with the same careful attention to detail. Photos of her standing there in thin pajamas with goosebumps on her arms. Video of her explaining exactly what happened in her own words. Wrote down every single detail in my notebook with times, dates, direct quotes. The evidence file was growing. Then I called Tyler for the 3rd time, and the conversation went exactly as badly as expected. Your daughter is at my house again. You physically shoved her outside and locked the door behind her because she asked for a glass of water. She wouldn't stop whining and nagging about being thirsty when we'd already told her it was bedtime. Maybe a few minutes outside by herself will teach her to appreciate what she has and follow the rules we set. It's 40 degrees outside, Tyler. She's 8 years old. She's in thin pajamas. She's fine. Stop babying her and acting like she's fragile. Kids today are too soft because everyone treats them like they'll break. A little cold air never hurt anybody. I'm bringing her back right now, and then you and I are going to have a very serious conversation about what's been happening in your house. Don't bother coming inside. And I'm done listening to your sanctimonious lectures about parenting when you don't have kids and don't understand what it's like. He actually hung up on me. Just ended the call mid-conversation because he didn't want to hear anything I had to say. I drove Emma back to their house, but this time I didn't just drop her at the door like I'd done before. This time I rang that doorbell and kept ringing it until Tyler answered, looking even more annoyed than usual. Then I pushed right past him into his house without asking permission or waiting for an invitation, walked into his living room, and found Logan curled up on the couch with red, swollen eyes and tear-stained cheeks, clearly having cried himself into exhaustion. I turned to face Tyler and Christina, who'd come out from wherever she'd been hiding. This stops right now. Tonight. You cannot keep locking your kids out of the house in the cold. It's dangerous. It's cruel. It's going to get someone seriously hurt, and it's completely unacceptable. Tyler crossed his arms defensively. It's my house and my kids. I'll parent them however I see fit. You don't get a say in this. What you're doing isn't parenting. It's neglect at best and abuse at worst. Get out of my house right now before I call the cops on you for trespassing. Christina appeared fully in the hallway then, adding her voice to the confrontation. You really need to leave. You're not their parent. You don't have kids. You don't get any say in how we choose to raise our children. This is none of your business. I looked at both of them standing there, Tyler defiant and justified, Christina with that perpetually irritated expression, and realized these people had no business being responsible for other human beings. This isn't over. Not even close, I told them both, and then left before the situation escalated further. Drove home and spent the next 2 hours researching everything I could find online about child protective services, mandatory reporting laws for concerned family members, and what exactly constitutes legal child neglect and endangerment in our state. Turned out that repeatedly locking young children out of the house in cold weather, especially at night, checked pretty much every single box for serious endangerment. The definitions were crystal clear. What Tyler and Christina were doing wasn't just bad parenting or questionable discipline. It was textbook neglect that put the kids in genuine danger. But I hesitated. They were my brother's kids. Family. And calling CPS felt like crossing a line you can never come back from. Like dropping a bomb on family relationships that would destroy everything permanently. I kept hoping somehow Tyler would come to his senses. That he'd realize what he was doing and stop before things got worse. Things got worse. The 4th incident was the absolute breaking point that forced my hand. Mid-November, early winter really settling in, temperature dropped down to 28 degrees overnight, well below freezing. Actually dangerous weather for anyone outside without proper clothing. I woke up at 3:15 a.m. to that familiar, desperate pounding on my door. Both kids this time, Emma practically dragging Logan, who was barely conscious and couldn't walk properly on his own. Got them inside immediately, and Logan's skin was ice cold to the touch, like touching frozen meat. His lips had a distinct blue tinge to them. His skin was pale and waxy. He could barely speak, just making little whimpering sounds. Emma was crying hard, saying they'd been locked outside for over an hour, trying to stay warm, huddled together in the bushes along the side of the house. But it kept getting colder, and Logan started acting strange and couldn't stay awake. I didn't hesitate this time. Called 911 immediately. Told the emergency dispatcher I had 2 children with possible hypothermia who'd been deliberately locked out of their house by their parents. Ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. Paramedics immediately went to work checking both kids' vital signs and core body temperatures. They determined Logan absolutely needed to go to the hospital to be properly monitored and treated because his body temperature was dangerously low. The paramedics asked their standard protocol questions about what had happened. Emma told them the complete truth. Their parents had locked them outside. They'd tried and tried to get back inside but couldn't. They'd walked to my house, but it took much longer than usual because Logan kept having to stop and rest, and Emma had to help him walk. Hospital staff, I learned, are mandatory reporters by law. The absolute moment they heard the story about kids being deliberately locked outside in freezing weather by their own parents, they were legally required to contact Child Protective Services. The wheels were set in motion whether I was ready or not. Tyler showed up at the emergency room about 40 minutes later, not concerned or panicked, just absolutely furious that I'd called an ambulance and gotten CPS involved in what he considered private family business. Christina stayed home. Apparently couldn't even be bothered to drive to the hospital to check on her own kid who was being treated for hypothermia. That told me everything I needed to know about her priorities. "You had absolutely no right to do this," Tyler hissed at me in the hospital hallway while doctors were examining Logan in a room nearby. "No right at all to involve outside people in our private family matters. Your son has hypothermia, Tyler. He was locked outside in 28-degree weather wearing pajamas. What exactly did you expect me to do? Let him freeze? Bring him home like you always do and mind your own business. Now we've got CPS breathing down our necks and making our lives hell because you couldn't just handle things quietly within the family. Maybe if you and Christina didn't keep locking your kids outside in freezing weather, CPS wouldn't need to be involved. Ever think of that? They're completely fine. Stop being so dramatic about everything. You're making this into something it's not." A CPS caseworker arrived about an hour later. Professional woman in her 50s named Patricia, who clearly had years of experience dealing with exactly these kinds of situations. She interviewed Emma and Logan separately in private rooms, spoke extensively with the medical staff about their conditions and what they'd reported, reviewed the hospital treatment records, and then asked if she could talk to me. I showed her absolutely everything I'd been documenting. The notebook filled with dates, times, and detailed descriptions. All the photos I'd taken on my phone. The videos of the kids explaining in their own words what had happened each time. Months of careful documentation, proving beyond any doubt that this was an established pattern of behavior, not just isolated incidents or misunderstandings. Patricia's face got progressively harder and more serious with each piece of evidence I showed her. She'd probably seen a lot of terrible things in her career, but this clearly still affected her. This is very serious neglect. These children are in real danger. This behavior is completely unacceptable and endangering. Tyler tried to minimize and deflect everything. Said the kids were exaggerating like kids do. Said they'd locked themselves out by accident and were making up stories. Said I was overreacting because I didn't have kids of my own and was poisoning CPS against him because of some personal grudge. Patricia wasn't buying any of it for even a second. "Mr. Wilson, I have extensive documentation from your brother showing this has happened at least 4 documented times over the past 2 months. I have hospital records right here showing your son was just treated for hypothermia. I have detailed statements from both children separately describing being locked out of the house repeatedly in the middle of the night in freezing temperatures. This isn't exaggeration, and this isn't accident. This is a clear, established pattern of child endangerment. They're my kids. I'm allowed to discipline them however I see fit. That's my right as their father. Not when that so-called discipline puts them at serious risk of injury or death. Locking young children outside in freezing weather wearing only pajamas is not discipline. It's abuse. And it stops right now. The word abuse just hung there in the air between them. Tyler's face turned red, but he couldn't actually argue against it because she was absolutely right, and he knew it. CPS formally opened an official investigation that same day. They conducted a surprise home visit the very next morning, interviewed both Tyler and Christina separately without allowing them to coordinate their stories, photographed every room in the house looking for evidence of neglect or danger, and talked to Emma and Logan's teachers at their elementary school. Turned out the teachers had already noticed concerning things they'd been quietly worrying about. Both kids frequently falling asleep in class, Emma hoarding snacks and food in her backpack, like she wasn't sure when she'd eat again. Logan being unusually anxious and scared about going home at the end of the school day. Within 1 week of intensive investigation, CPS had gathered enough evidence to formally recommend removing the children from the home temporarily, while the investigation continued, and the parents received mandatory intervention. Tyler and Christina would be required to complete comprehensive parenting classes, undergo regular unannounced home visits from CPS staff, attend counseling sessions, and demonstrate they could actually provide a consistently safe environment before the kids could potentially return. Tyler completely lost his mind when he got that news. Called me on my cell phone, literally screaming at the top of his lungs that I'd destroyed his family, that I'd turned CPS against him with lies and manipulation, that his kids were being stolen away from him because of my exaggerations and interference. I just let him yell and scream himself hoarse, then calmly said, "Your kids are being temporarily removed because you repeatedly locked them outside in freezing weather, because Logan ended up in the hospital being treated for hypothermia, because you showed absolutely zero concern for their safety or well-being, because teachers reported concerns about their behavior and condition. This isn't my fault. It's entirely yours. You did this to yourself. You're dead to me. You hear me? Dead. You'll never see these kids again. You're not family anymore." Then he hung up before I could respond. Fine by me. CPS needed emergency placement for Emma and Logan while everything got sorted out. They asked if I'd be willing to take them temporarily until they could either find an appropriate foster placement or Tyler completed all requirements to get them back. I said yes immediately without any hesitation. These kids desperately needed stability, structure, safety, and someone who actually gave a damn about them as human beings. I had the physical space in my house, I had a stable job with predictable income, and I had months of documentation proving I'd been the one consistently protecting them and looking out for their welfare all along. The CPS home visit took 2 days to arrange and complete. They checked every inch of my house, ran extensive background checks on me, interviewed my employer about my work history and reliability, talked to my neighbors about whether I was a responsible person. Everything came back completely clean. By the end of that week, Emma and Logan were officially placed in my temporary custody with CPS oversight. The first night they actually stayed at my house felt completely surreal, like I'd stepped into an alternate reality version of my life. I'd spent the previous 3 days frantically converting my home office into a proper bedroom for Emma. New bed, new dresser, cheerful bedding, posters on the walls. Set up Logan in my guest room with kid-appropriate furniture and toys. Went to Target and bought what felt like the entire children's section. New clothes in their sizes, school supplies, backpacks, winter coats, shoes, everything they needed. Emma cried herself to sleep that first night, not because she missed her parents or wanted to go back. She was scared they'd somehow show up and force her and Logan to return. She kept asking if the doors were locked, if Tyler could just break in and take them. I sat in the hallway right outside her room until she finally dozed off from exhaustion, promising her over and over that nobody would hurt her here, that she was safe now, that I wouldn't let anyone take them back. Logan adjusted faster, probably because he was younger and more resilient. The kid was 6 years old and just genuinely happy to be somewhere. He didn't have to constantly worry about being locked outside in the cold. He asked if he could have a snack whenever he wanted without permission. And when I told him yes, of course, help yourself, his entire face lit up like Christmas morning. Such a simple thing that most kids take for granted, but for him it was freedom. School became our new daily routine. I'd wake up at 6 a.m. every morning, make breakfast, pack their lunches with the foods they actually liked, drive them to school, then head to my work sites. Pick them up at 3 p.m., help them with homework at the kitchen table, make dinner, supervise bath time, read bedtime stories, all the normal kid stuff that should have been happening all along. It was absolutely exhausting, and I'd never worked harder in my life, but it felt right in a way my previous solitary existence never had. Tyler and Christina were required by court order to complete 12 full weeks of parenting classes, attend mandatory counseling sessions twice weekly, and undergo random unannounced home visits from CPS staff. They were allowed supervised visits with the kids every other weekend. Supervised meaning I had to be physically present the entire time to make sure nothing inappropriate happened. That first supervised visit was an absolute disaster and showed me everything I needed to know about whether they'd changed. Tyler spent the entire 2-hour visit complaining bitterly about how unfair the system was, how CPS had no right to take his kids away, how I'd ruined everything with my interference and exaggerations. He didn't ask Emma a single question about school or her friends, didn't play with Logan or show any interest in what he'd been doing, just wallowed in his own victim complex and sense of persecution. Christina was somehow even worse. She kept making passive-aggressive comments about how the kids looked perfectly fine and healthy, so clearly this whole thing was just blown way out of proportion and unnecessary. Emma sat rigidly silent the entire visit, not engaging, visibly uncomfortable. Logan played with toys in the corner, actively trying to ignore both his parents, like they were strangers he didn't want to interact with. When that visit finally ended, Logan immediately asked me if he had to go back with them. When I told him no, not today, you're staying with me, he visibly relaxed and his whole body language changed. That's the moment I knew with absolute certainty these kids were genuinely better off without their parents in their daily lives. CPS caseworker Patricia called me about a week later with updates on Tyler and Christina's progress through the required programs. Tyler had already missed 2 separate parenting classes without valid excuses and had shown up 30 minutes late to his individual counseling session. Christina had straight up refused to participate in role-playing exercises during the group parenting class, declaring they were stupid and pointless, and she didn't need strangers teaching her how to parent her own children. This isn't looking promising at all, Patricia admitted to me over the phone with clear frustration in her voice. In my experience, most parents in their situation are absolutely desperate to complete all requirements and get their children back as quickly as possible. They'll do anything, attend every session, follow every rule. But these two seem far more interested in being right and justified than in actually getting their kids back. That tells me a lot about their priorities. That's when I made my final decision. What would it take for me to petition for permanent custody instead of temporary? You'd need to file formal paperwork with the court. Given the circumstances, the children's current stable placement, and the parents' lack of progress, you'd likely have a very strong case. But you need to understand it would mean your brother and his wife permanently losing their parental rights. That's not something that gets reversed. They lost those rights the very first time they deliberately locked their kids outside at 2 a.m. in the cold. They just didn't realize it yet. Patricia didn't argue with my assessment. I hired a family law attorney who specialized in custody cases. Cost me $3,000 upfront plus ongoing fees. But it was worth every single penny to make sure Emma and Logan stayed permanently safe. The attorney reviewed all my extensive documentation, the detailed notebook, all the photos, the videos, the medical records from Logan's hospital visit for hypothermia. She told me it was genuinely one of the strongest, most well-documented cases of parental neglect she'd personally seen in her entire career. We filed for permanent custody. Tyler and Christina were officially served papers 3 weeks later. Tyler showed up at my house at 11 p.m. that same night, pounding on my door hard enough to wake the kids upstairs. I immediately went outside to deal with him, so Emma and Logan wouldn't hear the inevitable screaming and conflict. You're trying to steal my kids. That's what this is. Theft. I'm trying to protect them from you. There's a fundamental difference. They're my kids. You have absolutely no right to them. You gave up that right when you repeatedly locked them outside in freezing weather, and one of them ended up in the hospital. Actions have consequences. That's discipline. Kids need firm boundaries and structure, or they turn into spoiled brats. Kids need parents who don't actively endanger their lives. We went back and forth for 20 minutes. Tyler getting progressively more unhinged with each exchange, his voice getting louder, and his arguments more desperate. He eventually escalated to actual threats, saying he'd make me pay for what I'd done to his family, and I'd regret ever interfering. I pulled out my phone and started obviously recording video, which immediately shut him up. Nothing stops aggressive behavior faster than knowing it's being documented. You need to leave my property right now. You're violating the custody arrangement by being here and threatening me. Leave before I call the police. He finally left, but not before putting his fist completely through my metal mailbox in a rage, leaving a massive dent. I immediately called the police, filed an official report, and added that incident and the video to my growing evidence pile. The court hearing was scheduled for February, 3 months away. 3 months of waiting while Emma and Logan continued adjusting to their new stable life with me. They absolutely thrived during that time, in ways I'd never seen before. Their grades improved dramatically. Emma started actually smiling and laughing. Logan stopped having frequent nightmares about being locked outside in the cold. Their teachers called me multiple times, amazed by the transformation. They said they'd never witnessed such a dramatic positive improvement in students before. Emma went from barely scraping by with C's and D's to consistently getting A's and B's. Logan stopped hoarding food in his backpack and desk, stopped being anxious and jumpy, actually started participating in class discussions and activities. Tyler and Christina technically finished the required parenting classes under duress and threat of losing their kids permanently, but they clearly hadn't actually changed anything fundamental about their attitudes or behavior. During the supervised visits, they'd constantly complain about the requirements, about CPS interfering, about me destroying their family, but they never actually engaged meaningfully with Emma and Logan. It was like they viewed the kids as possessions they'd been robbed of rather than actual human beings they'd endangered. Court day finally arrived. Both sides presented evidence. My attorney systematically laid out the entire documented timeline of neglect, showed the hospital records from Logan's hypothermia treatment, presented the CPS reports and findings, displayed all the documentation I'd carefully gathered over months. Tyler's attorney tried weakly arguing that, yes, mistakes had been made, but the parents had now completed all required classes and deserved another chance to prove themselves. The judge asked to speak privately with Emma and Logan. Emma spoke clearly and confidently, saying she felt safe living with me and definitely didn't want to go back. Logan, 6 years old, told the judge directly that he liked his new room at my house and didn't want to have to sleep outside in the cold anymore. That simple statement from a 6-year-old hit the courtroom like a bomb. The judge asked Logan to clarify. He matter-of-factly explained how at his old house he'd sometimes had to sleep outside when they locked him out, but at my house he always had a warm bed and never had to be cold or scared. The judge's face went hard. She reviewed the evidence, asked clarifying questions to both attorneys, then made her ruling. Based on the clearly documented pattern of serious neglect, the medical evidence of endangerment, the children's own testimony about their experiences, and the parents' failure to demonstrate genuine change in their attitudes or behavior, I am granting permanent custody to the uncle. Parental rights of Tyler and Christina Wilson are hereby permanently terminated. Tyler absolutely exploded in the courtroom, screaming and yelling so loudly he had to be physically escorted out by bailiffs while screaming about corruption, kidnapping, and injustice. Christina just sat there looking annoyed and put out like this entire legal proceeding was nothing more than a massive inconvenience in her life rather than losing her children forever. That was it. Emma and Logan were officially, legally, permanently mine. We celebrated that night with ice cream and a movie marathon, just the three of us. Emma asked if this meant she'd never have to see her parents again unless she chose to. I told her that was exactly what it meant. Completely her choice. No pressure either way. She shook her head firmly. No. Logan asked if he could paint his bedroom any color he wanted, and I told him absolutely. We'd go pick out paint this weekend. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. Story 6. My golden sister told me, "You don't even need that apartment. You're single. I'm pregnant. I deserve it." I refused, and now her life is falling apart. Hey everyone, I've been reading posts here for years, but never thought I'd write one. Figured I'd share my story because it's been building since I was a kid. I'm the older brother, 28, and my younger sister, now 26, has always been the golden child. Let me take you through the whole story from the top. Here is the thing. My parents had me when they were still figuring out their careers. 2 years later, my sister was born. From the beginning, it was clear who the favorite was. My parents were polite to me, but when my sister arrived, it felt like everything revolved around her. People noticed it too. Relatives would comment on how much attention she got, but my parents would just laugh it off. As kids, the favoritism was obvious. My birthdays were small with a homemade cake, while my sisters had rented venues and big guest lists. When I asked why, my dad said, "You're older now." I was 7, she was 5. Toys were the same. I saved months for a skateboard. She mentioned wanting a bike and had one by the weekend. My mom's excuse was always, "She's younger, let her enjoy it." School made it clear too. I brought home good grades and got a quick, good job. My sister brought home average work or a drawing and it went on the fridge. I won first place at a science fair. My dad skipped it for work. She had one line in a school play, and both parents left work early to watch. My mom's reason, she gets nervous. She needs support. I was a good kid, stayed out of trouble, did well in school, helped at home. But my parents acted like I didn't need attention. I was fine, while my sister was always the special one, or baby. I constantly heard, "You're older, you should understand." Or, "She's younger, let her have it." Like my only job was to support her. By the time I hit middle school, the pattern was pretty much set. My sister was the center of everything. I was just there, expected to help out and not make things complicated. At that age, you start noticing the little things more, and there were plenty. In 7th grade, I wanted to enter a science competition and build a small solar-powered car, but there was a fee and supplies needed. When I asked at dinner, my dad said it was too expensive, and my mom suggested I skip it. A week later, my sister signed up for a dance camp that cost twice as much, and they paid without hesitation. I ended up making a rough version from scraps in the garage. I couldn't compete, but my teacher was impressed I tried. That's when I knew if I wanted something, I'd have to do it myself. Home life wasn't just about money, though. It was the way they treated us. If my sister made a mess, I was asked to clean it. If something got lost, it was assumed I was responsible. One time, she left a juice box open on the couch, and it stained the fabric. My mom called me from my room and told me to clean it up. I said it wasn't me. She said, "I know, but she's tired. Just do it." That was normal. She also had this habit of talking back. She'd argue, roll her eyes, slam doors. My parents called it attitude. If I did something like that, it was called disrespect, and I'd lose privileges. There were nights when my dad would pull me aside and say things like, "She's your little sister. You have to keep the peace. Don't provoke her." It didn't matter who started it. It was always on me to smooth things over. At school, I started noticing how different my life was compared to some friends. A buddy of mine had parents who came to his basketball games, helped with projects, asked how school was going. At our house, most conversations with me were instructions. Take out the trash. Help your sister with homework. Don't stay out too late. With my sister, it was always questions and praise. How was your day? What do you want for dinner? You did so well. By 15, I stopped expecting anything from my parents and focused on myself. I mowed lawns, did odd jobs, saved, and bought my own things. My sister still got everything handed to her and even joked, "I'm the favorite." My parents would just smile. I stayed quiet, knowing speaking up wouldn't change it. By the time high school started, I just stopped asking for things. When the school had field trips, I usually didn't go because I knew the answer would be no. Once, the class went to a science center out of town. It cost maybe $25. I didn't even bring it up. I used to think maybe money was tight, but then I'd see my parents take my sister shopping for clothes or gadgets. One time, I overheard my mom on the phone with a family friend. She said, "He's fine. He doesn't need much. She's the one we have to focus on. She's more sensitive." I guess that was how they saw me. Someone who didn't need help or attention. But I did. I just learned not to expect it. By sophomore year, I had started finding ways to earn my own money. I'd shovel snow, mow lawns, walk dogs. It wasn't much, but it gave me some control. If I wanted a book or a game, I'd buy it myself. My parents thought it was responsible and told people they were proud I was independent. They didn't see it was because I had no other choice. Meanwhile, my sister kept getting whatever she asked for. If she wanted to join a new club, they'd pay. If she wanted to quit something, they'd say it was fine. She liked showing off too. She'd tell me, "Mom and Dad said I'm special." I'd shrug it off, but it stuck. One last thing from that time. There was a career fair at school. I wanted to go because some tech companies were coming. It was a Saturday event. I asked my dad for a ride. He said he was busy taking my sister to a friend's party. My mom said to just take the bus. I went anyway, but I missed the first part because the bus route was slow. When I got home, my sister was talking about how fun the party was, and my parents were all smiles listening to her. I didn't even bother mentioning the fair. By the end of high school, I had stopped expecting them to be there for anything that mattered to me. I kept my head down, worked when I could, and planned to get out as soon as possible. By the time I finished high school, I already knew I couldn't count on my parents for much. They'd paid some of my basic school expenses, but anything extra I needed came from my own pocket. My sister had just turned 16 and already had a used car my parents bought her. When I asked if I could borrow it for prom, the answer was no, because she might need it. I ended up getting a ride from a friend. It didn't bother me much at that point. I'd learned that I had to handle things myself. I got into a decent state college. Nothing fancy, but solid. And it was in another city, which was important to me. I wanted space. My parents made a big deal about how they couldn't afford much help and how I needed to be responsible. I was offered some financial aid and a small scholarship. They paid my first semester's books. But everything else, housing, food, transportation, I covered with a mix of part-time jobs and savings I had from mowing lawns and doing odd jobs in high school. My sister got a big good luck dinner when she started community college later. When I left for school, it was just a quick goodbye. The first year was rough, but it taught me a lot. I worked evenings at a coffee shop near campus. On weekends, I picked up shifts at a bookstore. My grades stayed solid, but it meant I couldn't do a lot of parties or hang out like some classmates. I didn't mind. It felt good to know that everything I had, I earned. I budgeted tightly. I kept a notebook of every expense, down to the smallest snack. When I wanted something like a new phone or a better laptop, I'd plan months ahead. I learned quickly that money disappears fast if you don't track it. Meanwhile, my sister was still the center of my parents' attention. She switched programs twice and eventually decided school wasn't for her. She lived at home rent-free. They bought her a newer car because the first one wasn't reliable. I heard about it when my mom called to tell me she needed help setting up the Bluetooth. It didn't surprise me. At family dinners during breaks, she'd complain about being bored or wanting to travel. My parents would nod and say things like, "We'll figure something out." When I mentioned I was taking 15 credits and working 25 hours a week, they'd just say, "You've always been good at managing things." Sophomore year, I found a better job. One of my professors helped me land a position as an assistant in a small tech company downtown. It paid better than the coffee shop, and the owner didn't mind my class schedule. I kept the bookstore shifts for weekends. Most days I left my apartment at 7 a.m. and got back after dark, but my savings grew. I opened my first real bank account and started putting money into a small emergency fund. I remember sitting at my tiny desk, proud of the $500 I managed to keep untouched. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The lack of family support didn't bother me anymore. It became normal. I rarely called home unless it was for birthdays or holidays. My parents would ask how school was going, then switch to talking about my sister's latest plans. She got a job at a boutique once and quit after a month because she didn't like the hours. My mom told me she just needs to find her passion. I was tempted to point out that I didn't exactly love working double shifts, but I kept quiet. By junior year, I'd streamlined everything. I moved into a cheaper apartment with 2 roommates, sold my old bike, and bought a used car with cash I'd saved. It wasn't fancy, but it was reliable. Every dollar counted. I picked up freelance work online. Simple data entry, some tutoring, anything that paid. I also started reading about investing. Nothing big, just basics about saving, budgeting, and compound interest. I didn't have a lot, but I liked the idea of being prepared. When my sister turned 18, my parents threw her a big party. She got a new laptop and a week-long trip to the coast with her friends, paid for by them. I sent her a simple message saying, "Happy birthday." No party for me when I turned 20. I celebrated by working a shift and grabbing takeout with a friend. It didn't hurt. It was just the way things were. My parents had different standards for us. They always had. I just made sure to stay focused. By the time I was close to graduating, I'd saved enough to cover a deposit for an apartment and had paid off my small student loans. I didn't tell my parents right away because I didn't want to hear comparisons or comments. When I did mention it during a call, my dad said, "Good. Now maybe you can help your sister when she needs it." That line stuck with me. It wasn't meant as a joke. They genuinely saw me as the backup plan for her. That's when I decided that whatever I built, it would be for me. I wouldn't let their priorities dictate mine. Well, after graduation, I stayed in the same city where I went to school. The tech company where I worked part-time offered me a full-time role. It wasn't huge money, but for a 22-year-old just out of school, it was solid. I moved into a better apartment with 1 roommate, kept my car running, and started putting money away every month. I had a plan. Keep grinding, save, and eventually buy a place of my own. At home, nothing changed. My sister, now 20, was still living with my parents. She didn't go back to school after dropping out of community college. She had short-term jobs here and there, quit when she didn't like the hours, and complained about not being supported enough. My parents treated her like she was under pressure. Anytime I called, the conversation ended up about her. "Your sister is figuring things out. She's stressed. Be nice to her. She's sensitive." The rudeness really started showing around this time. When I visited for holidays, she acted like I was a guest in her house. She'd leave her stuff everywhere, make sarcastic comments about my clothes or car. "Wow, you're still driving that old thing? Do you even have time to live working all the time?" If I ignored her, she'd push. "Why are you so quiet? Too good for us now?" One Thanksgiving, I brought a small basket of food and drinks. Nothing fancy, just something to contribute. She rolled her eyes and said, "Thanks, but Mom already covered everything. You really don't have to show off." My parents didn't say a word to her. My dad actually said to me, "Don't get offended. She jokes like that." When she started dating a guy, things got worse. She bragged about how supportive he was, how they were going to do big things. At one dinner, she made a point to say, "He doesn't just work all the time like some people." My mom laughed. My dad added, "She just wants you to loosen up." I kept my distance, but I noticed the pattern. Anything good I did, they minimized. Anything she did, they magnified. Around that time, I got my first promotion. My manager called me into his office, offered me a team lead position. I was proud of it. I set up a small dinner with close friends and sent an invite to my parents and sister. They said they'd try to come. The day came. I booked a nice spot. Nothing extravagant, but I wanted to celebrate. Everyone showed except my family. I called my mom after. She said, "Oh, sorry, your sister got a new certification and we went out with her." It was some online class certificate, nothing career-changing, but they acted like it was a major milestone. My dad said, "You know how she gets." We couldn't say no. That night I realized I was done expecting them to show up for me. Despite the family drama, work was good. I kept moving up, saving more, and looking for ways to grow. I learned to avoid unnecessary spending, started reading more about money, investments, and property. My weekends were split between relaxing, seeing friends, and checking listings. My long-term goal was simple: buy my own place before I hit 28. The calls from my parents stayed the same. If they reached out, it was usually about my sister. Can you help her with her resume? She needs advice about a loan. She's thinking of starting a business. Maybe you can guide her. If I said I was busy, they'd get cold. Once, my mom said, "Don't forget where you came from." I didn't argue. I just kept doing my own thing. During one visit home, I finally called them out. My sister had been complaining about her job, saying she deserved better pay. My mom turned to me and said, "Maybe you can talk to your boss about hiring her." I said, "She doesn't have the experience. I worked for this." My dad frowned and said, "Don't be selfish. Family helps family." My sister smirked. "You act like you're some big deal. It's just a job." That night, I drove back to my apartment and made a decision. I'd never let them decide what I owed. I wasn't rude about it. I just stopped sharing details. I didn't tell them how much I made, where I invested, or what I planned. I kept everything short when they asked. It wasn't anger, just strategy. By 25, I was in a better spot financially than I expected. I had a decent savings cushion, a reliable car, and no debt. My sister still lived at home. She had a newer car my parents helped buy, and they covered part of her expenses. She'd make comments online about being independent, but I knew the truth. She later totaled the car. When my parents hinted again that I should look out for her, I just nodded. I wasn't going to argue. I had bigger plans, and I didn't need their approval. Every sarcastic comment and every ignored moment just made it clearer. They weren't going to change, but neither was I. By the time I was 26, I had a good routine. Work was steady and my savings finally looked like something. I kept my expenses low and said no to a lot of extras. My friends joked that I was stingy, but I knew what I was doing. I wanted to own something before 30. I started looking seriously at places. I spent weekends checking listings, meeting agents, and running numbers. I wasn't looking for anything huge, just a clean, solid apartment in a decent area. After months of searching, I found it. 2 bedrooms, plenty of light, close to work. The price was fair and I could handle the down payment. Signing those papers felt like crossing a finish line. I didn't tell my family right away. I waited until I had the keys in my hand. Then I sent a group text with a photo of me in front of the building. Finally got my own place. Took a while, but here it is. The replies were predictable. My mom said, "Congrats. When are you having us over?" My dad wrote, "Good job. Your sister will want to see it too." My sister's response, "Finally. Took you long enough." I invited them for a weekend lunch. I cooked, kept it simple, and gave them a tour. My mom immediately started talking about how bright and open it was and how perfect it would be for a young family. My dad asked about the second bedroom, guest room or office. Before I could answer, my sister jumped in. "It's obviously wasted space. Imagine a crib in there." I laughed. "Good thing I bought it for me, not for you to play dollhouse." She rolled her eyes. "You don't even have anyone. It's just you. Kind of selfish to keep a whole place like this to yourself." My dad gave me a look like I should ignore it. I didn't. "Yeah, I worked 2 jobs and skipped vacations, so I could selfishly buy something with my own money. Shocking, right?" My mom changed the subject, but I caught the tone. They were impressed, but it was like they couldn't give me the full credit. They asked about furniture, costs, and then my dad said, "Well, at least it's in a good spot. Easy to sell when you upgrade. Maybe your sister can use it if she needs something short-term." I laughed again. "Sure, if she's got market rent and a signed lease." They didn't like that. My mom said, "You're so sarcastic. We're just saying families help each other." "Exactly," I said. I helped myself because no one else was offering. They went quiet after that. Lunch was fine, but the comments didn't stop. My sister would send texts like, "When I get my own place, it's going to be bigger," or "Nice apartment. Could use more color, though." I just replied with thumbs up or said, "Great. Let me know when that happens." Months later, at another family dinner, things heated up again. My sister was talking about how expensive things were. She complained about rent, gas, and said, "Must be nice having a free place." "It's not free," I said. "Banks love getting paid every month." My dad jumped in. "She just means you don't have to worry about moving. It's easier for you." "Yeah," I said. "It's easier when you plan ahead and don't quit every job you get." My sister glared. "You think you're better because you bought a box with windows?" I smiled. "Better than complaining about a box I don't own." My mom told us to stop. "You two are always at each other's throats. Your sister is just stressed." "She's always stressed," I said. "Maybe that's why you keep paying for her stuff." My dad said sharply, "Enough. We help her because she needs it." "Right," I said. And I managed because no one helped me. Got it. The room went quiet. My sister muttered something about me being selfish. I just said, if selfish means not depending on mom and dad at 24, guilty as charged. Even with the tension, I didn't ask them for anything, didn't bring up my finances. I focused on my job. Things were going well. Meanwhile, my sister kept drifting. She had a string of short-term jobs and posted online about how hard the economy was. Every time I visited home, my parents talked about her plans, her big dreams, and barely asked about mine. I didn't care anymore. I knew my lane. But the hints didn't stop. My mom would say, when you settle down, maybe your sister could stay at your place for a while. My dad joked, hope you got a spare key. My sister laughed, yeah, you should keep it clean for when I need it. I kept the same answer every time. Not happening. I worked for it. One night, my dad called out of the blue. My sister needed a place to stay after a breakup. He asked if she could crash at my apartment, just for a few weeks. I said no. She's your sister, he said. She's also an adult, I replied. She's got 2 parents and a car. She'll be fine. He didn't like it. You've changed. No, I said. I just stopped being the backup plan. I could tell it stung, but I didn't feel bad. I was clear from day one. What I built was mine. They had years to treat me like family. They chose to treat me like support staff. Now I was just giving them the same energy back. Months later, I had everything running the way I wanted. Work was steady. I had savings. My place was fully furnished and felt like mine. My sister, meanwhile, was still at home. She had gone through 2 jobs and a short relationship that ended badly. My parents kept treating her like she was fragile, while I was the responsible one. Then came the family barbecue. It was late summer. Everyone was there. Parents, aunts, uncles, cousins. I showed up with some drinks and sides. My sister arrived last, arm around her boyfriend. The whole family crowded her like she was the guest of honor. Halfway through, she stood up with a big grin. I have news, she said, raising her glass. We're having a baby. Everyone cheered, hugged her, congratulated the boyfriend. I walked over and said, congrats. Hope you're ready for no sleep. She smirked. Well, I'll have a lot of help, right? I didn't think much of it then. The night went on. Then my aunt asked, so are you still doing a wedding? My sister said yes, but the timeline is tricky now. She turned to me and smiled too sweetly. Actually, this is the perfect time to bring this up. I've been thinking about your apartment. It would be the perfect place for us. Close to everything, plenty of space for the baby. I almost laughed, thinking it was a joke. Good thing I bought it for me, not for lease. She frowned. I'm serious. We can't stay with mom and dad forever. I need a safe place. And you have that second room you're not even using. You're right, I said. It's for my office and my stuff. Crazy how people use rooms in their own homes. She rolled her eyes. Come on. You don't even have a family. It's just you. This would really help me out. I worked 2 jobs for years to get it. Maybe you could try that method. My mom stepped in. She's asking because she needs it. You're single. You can wait a little while to get another one. I looked at her. Wait, you want me to hand over the place I bought because she's pregnant? My dad said, she's starting a family. That's more important right now. You'll understand when you have kids. I shook my head. So all those years I was on my own, working, paying rent, saving, none of that counted? But she gets pregnant and suddenly my work belongs to her? My sister crossed her arms. Don't make it a big deal. You can rent somewhere else for a year or 2. We'll take good care of your place. I laughed. Yeah, because you're famous for taking good care of things. Like that job you quit after 3 weeks? Or the car you totaled? Wow, she said loudly. So you're going to hold that over me forever? I thought family helped each other. They do, I said, when it's a 2-way street, not when it's a 1-way handout. My mom's face tightened. You always have to bring up the past. She's asking for help during a hard time. Hard time? I said. They made a choice. I didn't sign anything. I'm not their safety net. My dad's voice rose. Don't talk like that. She's your sister. Show some respect. I stood up. Respect goes both ways. Respect my work, my money, my home. The table went quiet. My sister started to tear up. You're so selfish. You've always been like this. It's just one thing, and you can't do it for me. One thing? You've had everything since you were a kid. The parties, the car, the attention. I got lectures. Now you want my place? Number. She got angry. Fine, keep your stupid apartment. Don't expect us at your next big moment. We won't bother. Trust me, I said. I stopped expecting you years ago. My mom muttered something about me being cold. My dad shook his head like I was a disappointment. I picked up my stuff. I came here to eat a burger. not to be shamed for owning something. I'll see you around. On the way out, my sister called after me. You're going to regret this when you're alone. I turned and said, better alone than broken bitter. That was the last time I tried to be polite about it. The texts started coming the next day. My dad sent, she cried all night. I hope you're happy. My mom wrote, we raised you better than this. My sister sent a wall of messages about how I ruined her pregnancy joy. I didn't respond. 2 days later, my sister called saying, fine, I don't want it anymore. But you could at least give us money to get a place. I laughed. You want me to pay you because I said no to giving you my home. That's creative. She hung up. After that, the family group chat turned sour. My parents acted distant. They hinted that I'd turned arrogant. I didn't care. I had my job, my savings, my space. I'd worked for it. I wasn't going to hand it over because someone else couldn't manage theirs. After the gathering, I decided to draw a hard line. I didn't respond to any more guilt texts. My sister stayed mad. My parents were cold. At first, I thought maybe things would cool off. Instead, they doubled down. They started talking to relatives about how selfish I was. A cousin sent me a message saying, what's going on? Your mom said you wouldn't let your sister stay with you. I explained once. I bought my own home after years of working. They think it's theirs, not happening. Most of my cousins actually sided with me. A few said, yeah, your parents have always babied her. It was nice to hear, but I didn't need validation. Work was my safe zone. I put in more hours, took on projects, and got noticed. A few months later, my manager called me in. Another promotion. It came with a raise and more flexibility. I decided to celebrate, but this time I didn't invite my parents or my sister. I threw a small party with friends and a couple of supportive relatives. Everyone else sent congratulations. My parents didn't even text. My sister posted online about families forgetting who matters, which I ignored. Then things shifted. My parents started hinting at money problems. I heard through my cousin that they were covering a lot of my sister's bills. She quit another job during her pregnancy, said it was too stressful. They were paying part of her rent, her car insurance, and covering hospital visits. My dad even dipped into retirement savings. I stayed out of it. Every time I got a vague text like, your sister's having a hard time, I replied with, hope she figures it out. A month before the baby was due, my mom called me for the first time in weeks. She asked, could you just loan your sister a little? Just until things settle. I said, you mean give her money so she doesn't have to manage her own life? Number. She said, you've changed. You used to care. I said, I learned who cared about me. It wasn't you. She hung up. The baby came. Everyone acted like it was a royal event. I sent a small gift and a short message. Congrats, hope the baby's healthy. My sister replied, wow, that's it? I left it on red. As months passed, it was clear things weren't smooth for them. The boyfriend had spotty work. Bills piled up. They moved in with my parents. The wedding plans fizzled once money got tight. I found this out through my aunt, who told me, your folks are stressed. Your dad is covering everything. I just said they made their choices. I wasn't gloating, it was just a fact. Then came the moment that sealed it for me. My dad called again, his tone softer. He said, we might have been too hard on you. We didn't realize how much you did on your own. He asked if I could help with a small amount each month until they got back on their feet. I almost laughed. So, after all these years of me hearing, you're fine, you can handle it. Now I'm supposed to carry you? No thanks. He said, it's family. I said, exactly. Family supports, not drains. I learned that from you. That ended the call. The real satisfaction came later. My company had a big end-of-year event. They highlighted some employees for major contributions. I was one of them. My photo was up on a screen. My name mentioned in front of the entire company and some local press. They gave me a sizable bonus. I posted one photo online, just me smiling with the award. I didn't tag anyone. The comments rolled in. Friends, co-workers, old classmates. My sister didn't say a word. My mom liked the post but never commented. My dad stayed silent. When I saw them at a holiday dinner months later, the energy was different. They were polite, quieter than usual. My sister barely spoke to me. My dad asked about work in a neutral tone. My mom talked mostly about the baby. No one mentioned the apartment. No one asked for money. It was like they knew the answer already. Before leaving, my sister muttered, you must feel pretty proud. I said, not proud, just glad I stopped waiting for anyone's approval. My dad shook his head slightly but didn't argue. My mom hugged me quickly and said, drive safe. That was it. Looking back, I don't think I ever got the apology I deserved. But I got something better. Distance, control, and proof that I could build everything without them. The kid who was told to understand while his sister got all the attention turned into the man who didn't need their attention at all. They're still the same people. She's still entitled. They're still enabling. But none of it matters now. I have my place, my job, and my peace. When I lock my door at night, I remember that every single piece of furniture, every bill paid, every inch of that apartment came from my own work. That's the only approval I'll ever need.